All right, everybody. Welcome back. Choices, Not Chances. I know it's been about a month. We're getting some good content out to you now, so thanks for the patience. Today I got a good one for you. I got Dave Pouleris, and he's affiliated with the Honor Foundation, Sean Carano, if anybody had caught that episode. He's got a wealth of experience through, in the field, several different units, worked as a communicator, with our top tier special assets over at MARSOC, and was kind of there from the beginning. So he's going to give us today, not only insight on his life and the careers he's seen in his career approach, but he's also going to give us some insight on some things that we've covered on the show before. The Honor Foundation being one of them, Fred Galvin's MARSOC 7 and the MARSOC 3 with the case that just kind of wrapped up. I mean, I don't know if it's fully wrapped up, but close to the end, if not all the way over. So we'll kind of talk about some of those things as we go along. But this is one I've been excited about getting. Of course, I'm excited about all of them, but we had to kind of push this one back
a while.
due to some things that happened. But thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate you being here.
How is everybody with that incident? Everybody good? Or as good as they can be?
Let's say as good as they can be.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a good situation.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible.
But yeah, so sorry that kind of bumped us back a little bit in the beginning, but hey, we're here now, and and we're going to kick into it. So you've seen the show, you know how the beginning goes. So I just kind of want you to start and let me know. Let's work up to a catalyst to joining, but I want to know where you come from, who you come from, siblings, and kind of that beginning stages of life.
For sure.
If you don't mind. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on, and shout out to Sean for making this possible, connecting us. When I heard his podcast, I was like, like we were talking about earlier, I was like, this would be a great opportunity for me to do this one more time.
Yep.
I did a real quick podcast with some friends downtown before who veterans, but it felt right, and it's also a nice compliment to Sean because our careers, strangely enough, didn't mirror each other totally. But when he was on the West Coast at First Force, I was on the East Coast at 2nd, and so we kind of, we'll get into how we worked because we were replacing each other in Iraq.
Sure.
But from then on out, we've just stayed close friends, and then now I was at the Honor Foundation. Now he is. So.
Phenomenal human being.
Oh yeah, he's super.
I mean, only formally meeting him on a couple occasions, but super impressed. Super impressive person. So,
yeah. He's a lot more scholarly and tempered and well mannered than I am. I'm more the loose cannon, but we hang out all the time. We keep in touch, and he's a really good sounding board, and always has been. So anyway,
yeah, good dude. So where were you born? Who were you born to?
Yeah, so Bill and Sylvia Pouleris. My father is the son of a Greek immigrant right off the boat, and an Irish immigrant right off the boat as well. My grandfather, who came from Greece, had enough money where he didn't have to come through Ellis Island. He came through Baltimore. And got here and totally assimilated. Feet hit the ground, went right to work. And there's an old story of my granddad chauffeuring some old rich dude at 13 years old. He's driving some rich dude around Baltimore, And and then my mother, her family's been around for a while, but they were originally she was born in Fayetteville, and kind of strange how the world circles back to North Carolina, but born in Fayetteville. They moved to Norfolk, Virginia, and that's where they met. She's a very proud Southern woman, so she said, "You may have been born in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, but you were conceived in the South." So make sure you tell everybody that. So that's my one plug for my mom. She's still alive. She's in Hampstead.
Okay.
She just turned 80.
Oh, wow.
So, so big time
Shout
for her.
out. Happy birthday.
Yeah. So, born in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, spent very little time there, moved to Gaithersburg, Virginia, spent some very young part of my life in Gaithersburg, Virginia. But, listening to your podcast, kind of like how do you, what are the connective fibers between a career in the military and your childhood? Like, my father was a Marine. He spent 10 years in the reserves. His father, my Greek grandfather, he was a Navy senior chief, retired as a senior chief, electrician, and retired from civil service. Majority of his time was spent on Norfolk Naval Air Station, and the naval base down there. And then my mother's family, served in the Air Force, served in the Navy, a lot of military down the Hampton Roads area. But my father, after the 10 years that he spent in the Marine Corps, he got out and just stayed in retail, right? And but I grew up, his field manual, like I had his field manual, which was a lot more impressive. It seemed like there was a lot more pictures in his field manual than it was in mine. But he still had his shelter half, and I would take that out into the woods. Take that out into the woods, and I put that up, and he was well armed. He had he grew up kind of as a swamp kid, living right outside the base, and so he ran around with his BB gun and stuff like that. Sure. So definitely had the Red Ryder, but he had kind of a traumatic experience working in retail where he was part of a kind of a robbery gone wrong up in Pennsylvania, and so after that he really kind of armed himself. He carried concealed for a while. Back in the day, before it was cool, before everybody was like, "What's your everyday carry?" My old man was carrying like the Starsky and Hutch under the arm type deal, and so I grew up with guns and weapons, and he taught me how to whittle, and he was a big woodworker as far as like carving and stuff. So, I was running around with an Uncle Henry pocket knife since I was like very young. Then when I had a son, I think one of the first things he got him was like. He got him a sunfish sailboat and a pocket knife, and I was like, "Dad, he's like 3." I was like, neither one of those things are age appropriate.
Give it a minute.
So so the point there is, then we moved from Maryland, and we moved to Richmond, Virginia, where I call home.
Okay.
I moved there from the 4th grade, and then like all the way through up to my Marine Corps career spent in Richmond, Virginia. A lot my formative years were spent in Richmond. Excuse me. And still the same thing. Had a big backyard, woods. Was digging fighting holes before I actually knew how to dig a fighting hole.
Before somebody was making you.
Exactly. And I thought it was cool because I was like, if the neighborhood bullies like come, because I was a runt, right? So if the neighborhood bullies come, I'll just run into my backyard, and I've got all these fighting positions. I'll lose them in this hole, and then they'll wonder, So I had my whole obstacle plan worked out and everything, and then as I'm digging this fighting hole, I cut the landline to the phone.
Oh, boy.
My mom's like screaming at me, "What are you doing out there?" The phone just went dead, and they had to come out and patch the line. So that was the end of my
No more fighting holes?
Yeah, no more position improvement from that point on.
I love it.
But yeah, I grew up as like a country kid, kind of in the country. We were kind of, if you left my neighborhood and you took a right down Route 60 in Midlothian, you were in the sticks, and if you took a left, you were like in suburbs and grocery stores and stuff like that. So I was kind of like country boy adjacent,
Country boy adjacent.
Pretty much. But I would ride my bike back and forth to the lake to go fishing, and then I'd pick up roadkill on the way and bring it home and skin it.
Oh, good.
So I always had that kind of like, I thought it was normal.
Country boy, that southern boy.
Yeah. I wasn't as southern as some of my friends are, but I always had that. I got that from my father. I was like that swamp kid, just running around, kind of feral, and never really had any intention. Well, and I'm going to miss some things, so I'll circle back. But especially about my high school career and what happened in high school and in wrestling, but. Never really had an intention of having a military career other than when Top Gun came out. And that was like everybody wanted to be a jet pilot.
They got me too.
And I grew up flying with my old man had his private pilot's license. He worked for Piedmont, which is now US Air. I forget who sold to who, but there was an airline called Piedmont. That's actually where my parents met. They were both working at Piedmont Airlines, and he grew up flying with like old World War II guys that were now like aviators for Piedmont in the civilian world. So he learned how to fly, got his pilot's license, bought a plane like 70 something, I think before I was born. So I grew up flying with him.
Yeah, you did your first solo at 16?
16, yeah.
So you were flying how long before that?
Oh, I was in the cockpit since I was a child, like baby. Because we lived in Richmond or we lived in Maryland, and my grandparents were still down in Hampton Roads. So instead of getting in the car and driving, we'd hop in the airplane, and an hour later we're in Hampton Roads, and Granddad's picking us up at the airport and spend the weekend, fly back. I remember getting in like middle school, and Dad'd be like, "Hey, what are you doing today?" I'm like, "I ain't doing nothing." He's like, "You want to fly to Nag's Head and go get some ice cream?" And Yeah, because we go to the Wright Brothers Memorial, that little airport
Yeah,
right there.
yeah.
And we land at Wright Brothers Memorial, and there's a Dairy Queen still there, because I was just there recently. Not at the Dairy Queen. Like you in walking distance, probably mile and a half. We'd walk, we'd grab a soft serve cone, hop back in the airplane, and we'd be back by dinner time in Richmond. So stuff like that. Things that I thought were normal.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and my mom was like, "It's not. Not every kid has an air." You know, I'm like show and tell. I'm like, "Hey, you know, I'll show you pictures of me flying." You know.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we also grew up sailing because my dad grew up at the beach down in Norfolk, making his own sailboats out of the scrap wood and crap on the base. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, I
know
sailed.
what's interesting is that I have heard a lot about sailing and the therapy that comes from sailing a lot in like the last 2 years.
It is,
and I'm hearing it from like our community. So it's so strange to me because I've never really thought about that being a therapeutic deal.
So there's a sailing group that hosts veterans for free down in Wilmington.
Yeah, I've talked to them.
Freedom Sailing.
Yeah, Freedom Sailing.
Yeah, shouts out to them. I've tried. I've never been able to match up the schedules. They also have a golf wiffle ball tournament every year.
Yeah.
That I think is pretty cool because I love golf wiffle ball. Anyway, yeah.
It's great if it works and it's therapeutic and it's not alcohol and drugs and killing you. Then get after
sailing. Of course, I didn't appreciate it as a kid because I always wanted a power boat where we could like go skiing and stuff. And my dad was a sailing purist. He was like, you know, he'd be telling me like when we cut the engines off and all you hear is the wind and the splash, and it's wonderful. And I was like, yeah, this is great and all. Now he was also the type of dude where, and I've got 1,000 stories like this. He was a kick the tires and light the fires type guy. Zero prep, like
just go.
My uncle, who was he went in the Air Force. He was getting his pilot's license too, and he was flying our airplane to get some additional ratings and stuff. And he one of the things he had to do was a cross country, so he flew me up to Pennsylvania. One of the kids that I actually we were born in the same time in Harrisburg. Anyway, he was going to do a cross country up there with me to pick this kid up and bring him back, and we were going to spend a couple weeks together, and then his parents were going to come down. And so he's like in the office there for like a couple hours, and I walk in, I go, his name was Harold, but we called him HD. I go, HD, what in the hell are you doing? He's like, I'm filing my flight plan. He goes, does your father not file a flight plan? I'm like, I have no idea what a flight plan is. No. I'm like, my father lost an engine over Dulles Airport in his 172. Yeah, because he forgot to check, open up the cowling and look in and see if there was a bird's nest and stuff like that, where he was just a let's get after type dude,
Yeah, yeah.
And, but yeah, I mean, and so I remember being in a 35-foot sailboat in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay, which seems like the middle of nowhere, because you can like
big bay.
Get in the middle of the bay and not see land, and we are like on our side in like swells that like I'm missing the horizon when I'm going down in the trough of this swell, and I'm hanging off the side praying. I'm like, Jesus, please, Lord God, if you just get me through this, and he is just loving it. He's like, yeah, this is awesome. It's amazing. And I'm like, the rail is in the water, bruh. He's like, we're not going to tip over. I swear we're not going to tip over. I'm like, whew. So, long story short.
I get the mentality now.
Yeah. So we, had a really, really like super cool cultured childhood. Couldn't ask for better parents. I mean, they were great. Circumstances in their lives that, we all have when we're grown up and we have a family. But all in all, man, at the end of the day, when I retired, my father didn't get to see me retire. He died just before I retired. He knew my ticket was punched. He knew everything was going to be taken care of. It kind of sucked not having him there.
Yeah.
But I said at my retirement, I'm like, look, all my artistic tattoos and whittling and wood carving that I still do now, painting, and just the artistic side of my brain I get from my old man. He was just that free-spirited, kind of dude, very open-minded, really, really cool. And so was my mom, but she was more like the dig your heels into the dirt. She was the farm kid. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, make a living off the sweat of your brow. And, oh, by the way, we'll get into this, but when I graduated college, I enlisted. Mm-hmm. I didn't go right into OCS. And my mom was like, and I came back and I was like, Mom, I may just stay enlisted on active duty. And she's like, the hell you are. She's like, I just spent good money on that education. You're going to OCS and you're going to be an officer.
Now, you went to, this is going back a bit, but you went to Fork Union Military Academy for high school, right?
No, just postgraduate year.
Oh, okay.
So let me get into high school, and then we can go into FUMA. So grew up in Richmond and spent part of my time punk rock skateboarding. And you'll notice this kind of a theme with me is I walked both sides of the line. I was punk rock skateboarder, like 80s growing up, Tony Hawk, Stevie Caballero, Christian Hosoi, like right when all that was popping off. And then I was also like a jock too, like a football, wrestling.
Check.
So I had my jock friends, and I knew.
Yeah, but that gives you people on all sides of the aisle.
It is. Well, here's the thing.
I was sort of like that myself.
Here's the thing that really it prepared me for is like our lives are built around relationships.
Oh yeah, dude.
And there's nothing, if there's anything that this kind of journey through military, the Honor Foundation, post-military, our generation of vets that we need connection. That I've learned, it's like, and then getting jobs in the civilian workforce. I think I've had several jobs since I've gotten out. I think one of them I got that it wasn't a referral or some way connected to a relationship I had built.
To the network.
So I learned early on, like I loved to skateboard and I loved punk rock and being like edgy and doing all that stuff. And I got these friends, and then I got my jock friends that never touched those guys. They never mingled with those cats. But I've got good relationships on both sides, and I keep those relationships good, not only because, I really enjoy hanging out with both of them, but I was a runt. I had to survive. I couldn't survive on my muscle. So I had to survive on some sort of like connection relationship-wise. I'm not very charismatic, but I learned how to deal with stuff like that. I grew up being bullied, so I learned how to survive, and I learned how to navigate those waters without the advantage of being some stud. And my son was the same way. Totally different thing because, of everything that all the social media and stuff like that. But I didn't start growing until I was out of high school. I'll put it to you this way: I'm 5'10", whatever, 200 plus pounds now. I wrestled. My senior year, I was 5'4", and I wrestled 145.
Oh yeah, you were a little guy.
I was a little guy,
yeah.
And that shows you. Senior year of high school, I didn't start growing.
Yeah.
I gained 6 more inches and 60 more pounds or something like that.
Yeah.
When I popped out of college on the other end,
now,
6 years later.
Okay, so you went to high school in Richmond.
Yeah, Midlothian, Virginia. We're on the south side of the river.
You said Midlothian?
Midlothian.
I was trying to figure out how to say that when I was reading your resume. I'm going to ask him.
Yeah, we were the Trojans, which we had. This is the 80s, early 90s, right? And all the they had come out, the Booster Club came out with these stickers. It was our Trojan head on the front of the sticker, and it said, "Do it with be a winner and do it with a Trojan," or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like only the kind of stuff you get away with in the 80s.
Absolutely, play on words with that one.
They stopped.
Wouldn't go well this year.
Exactly. So, got into high school in '88, graduated in '92, and in those 4 years, packed in a life's worth of just like everybody does in high school. But one of the major things in my life that occurred in those 4 years was wrestling. And again, I was a runt. Didn't really take to wrestle. I couldn't move my body around. My father, he grew up in Virginia Beach, where like the Granby roll was invented by the cats. Billy, I forget what his last name is, but Great Bridge Wrestling, ODU Wrestling. That Granby roll was invented in his like hometown area. So he grew up kind of wrestling, didn't really, but he always, like, I had a pull-up bar in my backyard. This is probably a little bit of the Marine stuff coming out from him. Pull-up bar in my backyard, and he was like, if you really want to get strong, you really want to fight against these bullies, get on that pull-up bar, start doing pull-ups. Of course, I didn't listen to him. And funny story, I was just telling a kid that we sent off here to VMI this year. I was like, I went into VMI, I couldn't do one pull-up. I left VMI, I was like doing 15,
Yeah.
So I learned that lesson late. But again, didn't really take to wrestling straight away because I wasn't, even though I skated and played football, wasn't really attuned to like moving my body in the way that like people take advantage of. Like everybody sees MMA and jiu-jitsu and all this stuff now that's the latest hotness, and rightly so. It's killer stuff. And we can get to me trying to be young and go back to the jiu-jitsu gym later. But back then there wasn't, I mean, even wrestling in Midlothian, especially in Richmond, it was popular, but it wasn't super like there wasn't a lot of guys doing it.
Yeah.
The football guys kind of stayed in their lane, and only a few of them crossed over to wrestling. Of course, wrestling is the same season as basketball. So anyway,
yeah.
But I started wrestling because I had these new neighbors that just moved in from Wisconsin, the Wysong brothers, and they were fraternal twins. One was gigantic, like a gigantic ape of a man, and the other one was like tall and lanky, looked nothing apart. You wouldn't even know they were brothers if you met them.
It's identical, huh?
But they were excellent.
Oh,
wrestlers.
you're not identical.
Not identical,
not
fraternal.
identical.
Yeah. So they came out at the same time, but they don't look anything alike.
Oh, I got
Their
you.
mannerisms and everything like that are just like twins.
Yeah, but you can't tell.
But you can't tell. One's
Okay.
huge, and the other one's kind of long and lanky.
Yeah.
But they were both studs in wrestling, and so I kind of looked up to them as big brothers, and they got me into wrestling. Of course, I came from Wisconsin, the Midwest.
That's a wrestling state right there.
Yeah, a lot of those Midwestern, Iowa and all that. So looked up to them, took on wrestling, and then my junior year, I walked into the football coach, and I'm like, I'm 5'4", 145 pounds. So you think junior year, I was probably smaller than that. I was like, Coach, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm going to concentrate on wrestling. And of course, the football coach was like, yeah, no skin off my back,
whatever.
brother. He's like, take it easy, man. But again, my mother's side of me, I dug my heels in, and there was this camp that only one other guy that he was in my class that I knew had gone to. It was called J. Robbins Intensive Wrestling Camp. And you've got Dan Gable, who is the wrestling god, in America. He's like the original. Like, he only had one defeat. And if you ever watch Joe Rogan's podcast with Dan Gable, if you want to know anything about Dan Gable, watch Joe Rogan's podcast.
Okay.
The other cool thing about Dan Gable is President Trump gave him like some presidential medal recently. And of course, President Trump was kind of doing his President Trump thing when they gave him the medal in the Oval Office. And he looks at Dan and he goes, oh yeah, Dan, you really, really accomplished wrestler. And then he looks over at his crew. He's like, what do you think, guys? What do you think? You think I can take him? And he looks over at Dan. And he goes, hey, Dan, you think I can take you? And Dan looks at him and goes, you wouldn't stand a chance.
No, sir, absolutely not.
So so they started selling these T-shirts. It's Dan Gable because he was ended up, he went to Iowa, not Iowa State where he wrestled, but University of Iowa, the Hawkeyes. He went there and led them to multiple season championships. Coaching.
Oh, okay.
And he was an intense coach. He was the guy who was screaming. So I've got a T-shirt of him like pointing and screaming, and it says, you wouldn't have a chance.
Nice.
So there was Dan Gable and Jay Robinson, and Jay Robinson coached at University of Minnesota, and Dan Gable at Iowa, and Jay Robinson's camp was known as this incredibly intensive camp because he designed it. He was an Army Ranger. I don't know if he did Ranger Battalion or if he was just in Ranger School.
Right.
But he designed his camp around Ranger School, where everybody every day was graded. You got one of three grades. You got an up or a positive, you got a negative, or you got a neutral. And at the end of the camp, the only thing that you got coming out of this camp was a T-shirt that said, I did it, J. Robbins Intensive Wrestling Camp, and mine was 1991. And it had the schedule of every day on the back of the T-shirt. Mm-hmm. And you had to have so many positive points at the end of the camp to get this T-shirt.
Oh, okay. And
it was, from 6 a.m. till he had us meditating on the mats at 9 o'clock at night.
Oh, wow.
It was before all of this holistic type stuff was coming around. Yeah. Jay Robinson had us doing that stuff. Yeah. He had us doing, in the morning we were doing cardio, go to breakfast. Then we were doing technique, go to lunch. Then after lunch, we're doing intensive wrestling. Then after that, we're doing weight training or some sort of, before CrossFit, he was into intensive weight training. Sure. Everybody get on a machine and then 30 seconds, as fast as you can go, and then on to the next one. So it was an incredible camp. And there was there was a 21-day camp or 28-day camp, and then there was 11-day camp. I went to the shorter one in Pennsylvania. And at the end of the camp, there was you could either run, I think it was like 18 miles if you needed the points, if you thought because they didn't tell you how many points you had if you were going to graduate. And so you could either run the 18 miles and get 2 extra points, or you could run like 9 and get no points added. So
just regular, yeah.
So I rolled the dice, baby, and at the 9-mile turnaround, I was like, screw this.
Yeah.
And literally, I walk in with my bags in my hand, and they're like, Pouleris. Yep, give him this T-shirt, and I was like, thank God.
You stopped at the 9 mile?
I turned around the 9 mile, went back. I rolled the dice. I'm like, I think I'm good, because I think I only got the whole camp. I think I only got 1 negative, 1 positive, and the rest of them were pretty neutral. So I thought I was sitting pretty good. I didn't.
Now, how old were you when you went through this?
I was a junior.
Oh,
So it was
you're
between
still
my
like
junior
16?
and senior year. I was like 16 years old.
Yeah.
Worked at Freddy's Discount Drugstore to pay for it, pay for the flight up there. Yes.
Hell yeah.
But it was sick. But my dad, and this is the moral of the story, my dad always said, you came back a different person from that camp. And from that point on, that's where I really learned, like, the results come from really hard work. If you really dig into something, and of course that was all pretty physical, and there was some mental to it, but
I was going to say, if you're coming in, and not to be, overly forward, but you're coming from an area where at 12, 13, 14 years old, you're flying your own plane and, headed to Nag's Head for ice cream and back in the best kind of way. Was there much struggle before that? Was there much like, you're going to puke if you don't do this, even if you do it, you're going to, there's pain coming your way? Was there a lot of that?
No.
Or was it most of that kind of voluntary?
I mean,
even the camp was voluntary, you say, but was there somebody like constantly pushing you like that?
That's a good question, because I can't think of any time there was. We would do 2-a-days in football. When I got into high school football, we would do 2-a-days, but you can kind of get lost in the crowd. And there wasn't,
and that's why I'm asking, because I could see that being a thing that would dramatically change somebody had they not been through something similar to that prior to.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. It was a 180-degree change in my mentality, physically too. I came back. I was not
ready.
jacked, but I was ready to roll. And I came back. I never started for the wrestling team. I came back and I was the starter the entire senior year. Got my letter, everything, had a winning season.
That does a camp like that probably does a whole lot for reassured confidence in a young man, to be up there with those other guys being shown, your body can do a lot more maybe than you think it can. Right?
Yeah, physically, it showed you that you can withstand. You're more resilient than you think, and in that resilience, it comes back stronger than it was before. But that's the defining moment where I was like, holy shit, my mom and dad are telling the truth. Like, if I just work hard, well, that was physical, but it leads into what we're going to talk about with FUMA and with VMI. But I was like, dude, if I just work my ass off, man, the good stuff will come. Yeah. And so I was like, they're not just BSing me.
And then, like, when that clicks in the mind of somebody, it's like, oh, well, that's all I have to do? Just like go hard as fuck all the time?
I'm living this with my son, or I lived it. He's actually at kind of the tail end of this lesson in his life, but he's a senior in college now. And there were some times where he was like, really coming to terms with like, holy crap, if I just dig my heels in, he took 2 summer school classes and works at the Mellow Mushroom right now. He's putting in a ton of hours at work, and he passed both of his summer school classes for
getting after it.
Just getting after it, man.
Yeah, man.
You just wake up in the morning, and it's one of those things where I'm kind of in a weird headspace right now as far as like trying to figure out like that's a different story, but it is one of those things where if you set your mind to it, like if you want it, you go out there and get it, and don't let them try to say you can't have it, and that'll just keep that fire stoked even harder.
Fueling it.
Yeah, man. And
I try to tell people now, especially young people, like, if you can't make it in America right now, you ain't gonna make it nowhere. If you think that you can't make it here because it's, oh my God, so hard, to me it's like, this is the easiest time there's ever been to make it, because we are surrounded by a culture of young kids that don't want to work. They want the easiest way out. So if you just go out, dig your heels in, put your head down, decide what avenue you want to take, and then just go hard.
Yeah.
You will pass everybody.
Yeah.
Like in your peer group.
I'm struggling right now with my son's generation because I'm still in the workforce and I'm in a blue collar field right now. And I think that spirit of get after it is still in that generation.
Sure.
They're just learning it later in life. They're
Delayed, yeah.
They're delayed in their mental, and a lot of it has to do with that stinking phone.
Yeah.
Because that's two worlds. They live in two worlds, literally.
Yeah.
They live in their digital world and they live in their physical world. And if they got their digital world in high school, they think if they got their digital world on point,
that translates somehow
the
to
other real
real
literal
life.
world, they don't have to worry about too much.
Right.
And my son's finding now, it's like when those two worlds collide, guess which one falls?
Yeah, one of them.
It's that digital world is going to crumble. Now, it might crumble the way you don't want it to crumble, but you literally have to wake up in the morning. You got to go out there and you got to make your bones in this world.
That's it.
And, you just got to wrap your mind around that. So I think they're a little delayed in learning the lessons that you and I, or somebody even my age or older, learned very much earlier. And my parents too, their generation too, they learned it way earlier.
Sure.
Anyhow, so wrestling was
J-Rock Wrestling Camp.
Yeah,
on point.
it was-
You came back a different person.
absolutely. That's one of the moments in my life where I'm like,
You're still
so
wrestling
thankful.
145, but you came back a solid, confident 145
Correct.
who now is taking over
Yeah,
that
I didn't
weight
have to
class.
cut much weight.
Check.
I wasn't. We had studs. I mean, we were a really good wrestling team. Only one of us went to, or a couple of us went to state. I didn't make it through regionals. Anyway, but we were a solid wrestling team in our area, and so I wasn't going to drop a weight because I had studs below me, and I wasn't going to go up a weight because the best wrestler in the team
Was above you?
He was 160, but there was another stud above me at 152. So 145, man, I was happy. Now Paul Allgaier, if for whatever reason Paul listens to this podcast, he beat me every year because we were in the same weight class. He beat me every year until my senior year.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was more concentrated about going to college.
Right.
And I was like, hell no, I'm going to get. And so me and Paul Allgaier had to wrestle off. It's strange that I still remember his name. Had to wrestle off for that starting spot every single. Like sometimes there were studs where it was like, they kind of knew you're not beating him. If you want to wrestle off for that spot, go ahead, but he's going to beat you every time.
Yeah, yeah.
With me and Paul, the coaches were like, and the whole team
Just
knew.
not sure it could go either way.
The whole team would get around and see like, who's going to, and after I had beat him like 2 or 3 times, the team was like, holy crap. They were like, is Paul ever going to start on this team again?
Yeah.
And I think he beat me one match. But every other match I beat him, and we were still great friends, and there was no hard feelings.
Yeah, that's how it should be.
Yeah, but I didn't have to cut any weight really. On weigh-in day, I didn't eat because I wanted to feel cool, I'm cutting weight too. But I just didn't eat, and I would come in and 145 on the dot, boom, off the scale.
Yeah.
So, but it was ultimately a defining moment in my life. But I wasn't scholastically as brilliant as I was on the mat. That year, and so I literally I started freaking out halfway through, like, am I going to graduate on time?
Oh boy,
from high school. And so I wasn't set up to go to college. I spent 2 years outside of high school. I graduated in 92, 93. I went to a junior college in town, and then the following year is when I went to Fork Union. And in that time, I started getting into the volunteer fire department, which is another defining moment in my life. That's where I really learned how to be a dependable person on a highly effective team operating in pretty crazy conditions. Like you can't, and I had an incredible mentor, Scotty Roberts and Gareth Overstreet and the other guys in that fire department who were volunteers as well. Not to mention the career guys that mentored us.
Sure.
But Scotty Robert he's like the leader of our crew when we were in that fire department. And he was the type of guy where you brought your A game every day because he didn't put up with BS.
Yeah, you could just go home.
Yes, and especially if we all showed up for a call, and he was like, you didn't want to be the guy who's like, hey, you wait for the next truck out the station.
Yeah.
You want to be the guy's like, hey, you get in the jump seat, captain's chair, I'm driving, let's go. You want to be the guy picked. So I mean, he's been a big brother all my life. He's somebody I still look up to for mentorship and guidance. He works for the FBI now. He spent his whole first career in the fire service in Henrico, right outside of Richmond.
Okay.
And fire marshal, and then now he's doing something with the FBI, which is super cool. But yeah, that's where I learned like that you've got to be dependable. Like if you're working in a team and you're covering.
Now somebody's life is on the line in a fire. Yeah.
Somebody's life's on the line, or there's a piece of equipment that you must know how to operate, or the pump breaks on a fire. You need to know how to, all those different skills that I was taking for granted. And I've got a story about flying where I took for granted preparedness, doing the work. What is it? The more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in battle. Whatever.
Sure.
But that's the truth, bro.
Yep.
It's like when you're out on that sailboat, or because there's nobody coming to help you when you're out in that sailboat in the middle of nowhere.
That's right.
Or when you're in that airplane, or when you're on that fire scene, or when you're in combat, everybody who's with you in that situation is depending on you to be as dedicated to that thing as they are, because you're pulling a certain amount of weight that they can't necessarily pull.
Yeah, you have to do your job.
Absolutely.
You have to do what you say you will do.
And when I retired in MARSOC headquarters, I looked down at Scotty. I was like, you guys taught me way before this place and way before the Marine Corps how to be a dude on a team that everybody was like, yeah, you're coming with me because I can depend on you.
Yep.
I know you got your shit in one bag.
Yep.
And I was like, thank you for that.
Yep.
And
sometimes people pay the price for being dependable, eh?
Yeah. Oh,
I always liked it, but it's the fact that when you're dependable and you're good, you will be called on,
dude.
Way more,
dude.
Yeah.
I always said, and I'll never shit talk the Marine Corps, because the Marine Corps is an organization that needs to exist, but it's going to do what it needs for the betterment of the Corps, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I always told my guys, I'm like, hey, all of you, especially at Second Force and at MARSOC, I was like, yeah, all y'all are studs, and the Marine Corps is going to ride you until you are exhausted, because look, that's just the way it is, man.
That's it.
And you should invite that. Will they take advantage of you? Hell yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you need to have some good coverage, like officers and senior staff NCOs, et cetera, that tamper or tamp down or
Buffer.
give you know when you need a break, or know when you've been put on on post to that type of stuff.
Yeah.
You need to have good guys around you supporting you. But yeah, it's like, look, man, this is game day every day,
Mm-hmm.
and so you got to come out to play. And if you're catching the ball, or if you're making more yardage on a run than all the other guys, then I'm going to keep handing you the ball.
That's
and I'm
it.
going to keep throwing you the ball.
Yep.
Because we're succeeding based off that.
That's right.
And then when it shifts to somebody else, then we'll do that. You'll get a break and you'll come back,
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of life in general, but you start talking about the fire service, you start talking about combat, you start talking about these things where real flesh is involved, and it's like,
Yeah.
you need to know that. You know,
Yeah.
It's good that you learn that before you get there. Yeah.
And on the flip side of that coin, you just don't want to be that guy that are like, nah, man, you can hang back.
Yeah, how's it feel to be last picked in anything from
Exactly.
fucking kickball till the end to the end of your life?
don't-
It sucks to be the one like that nobody
Yeah.
wants.
And if it only takes a couple times, because I'd been that kid. It only takes a couple times before you're like, oh shit, okay, I'm going to do what it takes so I don't get picked last again.
Mm-hmm.
But and we'll go into my military service, and I'll throw out the disclaimer when we get there. But I don't want to portray myself in any way, shape, or form that is unauthentic, or that I've done things that I didn't do.
Sure.
So I'm very transparent in that respect. The last podcast I was on, I was like, I wasn't an 0321. I wasn't a recon guy. I didn't go to ARS or BRC.
Sure.
I was like, I did go through selection to get selected to go and be part of the command. But yeah, so we'll get there.
So let's circle back.
High school.
No. I mean, I
Okay.
feel good about high school, but I want to know. I think the catalyst to service was probably a lot to do with your dad, is what it sounded like. He was a Marine. You constantly had that swamp kid kind of nature in you. But so you get out of high school,
Mm-hmm.
you go into this postgraduate. You go over. Did Fork Union Military Academy have anything to do with your push
No.
toward service, or
No,
was it just sustaining it?
So what happened was, and I don't know what it was like when you were coming up, but it was like, hey, the formula for success is graduate high school, go to college, graduate
Yeah,
college, get
same.
a wife, get the kids, get a job, and then do your life.
Yep.
So college was a big deal. And, of course, I got my mother right behind me going, your ass is going to college.
Yeah.
And so, again, the Wysongs next door, one of them went to VMI. Mike went to VMI. Mark was recruited by the military academy at West Point.
Mm-hmm.
He had to do a prep year there. Didn't make it. So Mark circles back. Mark goes to VMI. So what did I do? I'm looking up to these guys. I followed them. So I'm like, I'm going to VMI.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, because it still is a great school.
Sure.
It's academically light years ahead of where we were in, when did I matriculate? 94, the summer of 94. It's light years ahead of that now. But it was still a solid school. Virginia has a VMI mafia to it. Like,
I bet.
alumni,
They all do.
Alumni is strong in Virginia, especially in Richmond. So I was like, this is the key to success. But I can't get there academically. I got turned down twice. That's one thing Brad Moses spoke on the other night. People are going to tell you no a lot out in this world. Get used to it. So I got told no twice. And then somebody was like, hey, go to Fork Union. So that's kind of like a feeder school. A lot of guys go to Fork Union, especially if they're trying to go like D1 athletes. I think Eddie George went to Fork Union Military Academy.
So I had a buddy go there, which is why I was kind of interested. And he went there for high school, though.
Mm-hmm.
His brother had gotten in trouble a little bit up where we live, and his parents, I think, in a like extreme overhaul of the pendulum to ensure that didn't happen with their next boy.
Yeah.
They sent him there, and
Fork Union will do it, buddy, because that's out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
Virginia.
Fork Union. I mean, he came back a great guy. He was a great guy before he left. It was maybe just a little bit of a little bit too much on the parents' end, but he loved it and he learned a lot, and he came back like a different person for sure from that school. So, but I didn't know they had like preparatory classes to go into feeder colleges. That's why I was asking.
Yeah. D1 athletes go there. God, I forget his name. Played in the NBA. They called him White Chocolate. He went there for like 30 minutes because he got there. He was like, this school is not for me. He talks about it on some podcast, but then finally got into the NBA. And so it's got some notable.
There's definitely notable people that have went there.
And
their football team is insane.
Yeah.
That's what my buddy did. He went there and he played on their football team and won a state championship in 2004.
I went there and I started coaching wrestling.
There you go.
I coached wrestling the year I got out of high school. My coach knew I wasn't going anywhere, so he was like, hey, man, St. Christopher's needs a wrestling coach, an assistant coach. You go over there. And so I assistant coached over at St. Chris, which was like a private, well-to-do, fancy school over across the river. Coached them for a year, and then next year I went to Fork Union Military Academy. Fork Union wrestled St. Chris.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, went to Fork Union, and I did okay, but it was enough for VMI to look at my application and be like, okay, he wants to be here.
Gotcha.
He really wants to be. He's going. And my mother goes, do you really want to go to VMI? And I was like, yes. I mean, that was the first, like, one of the big boy decisions I had to make. She goes, because I literally have to spend a ton of money to send you to Fork Union.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to do this, and if you're not going to put all your heart into it,
go somewhere else.
Or do something else.
Yeah.
And I was like, I felt a lot of weight on my shoulders. I was like, yeah, let's go. So I went to Fork Union.
And it worked.
A lot of praying right before I sent that application away. And I came back accepted at VMI.
Hell yeah.
And
what was it like when you opened the letter and you figure out you're accepted?
A lot of relief, a lot of thank yous to answered prayers.
Yeah.
It was cool, but VMI doesn't come with a lot of celebration. VMI comes with a lot of, what did I just get myself into? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but something you were after. It's a goal that you were like set your mind to, and then to get that.
But rat year is rough, bro.
Okay.
It is rough. You got a hell week, and it's, of course, everybody's was tougher than the way they are now. But it was a very regimented. We had a rat. It's called the rat line, where for the first, at least through the first semester, you're in this regimented, they call it the rat line, and basically you're just you're like a candidate or at boot camp,
like a recruit.
Yeah, like a recruit. You're like a recruit boot camp, and all the upperclassmen can PT your butt anytime, as long as you're inside the barracks. They can drop you anytime. So it would take you. Rats live on the 4th stoop, and it would take you 30 minutes to walk up 4 flights of stairs, because every flight you're on, they're like, drop rat. Yeah. Crank out 20.
And is this anybody that's above you, or just a cadre?
Anybody,
or?
A sophomore, which is a 3rd classman, juniors are 2nd, seniors are first classmen. Anybody from third classman down to the senior can drop you. And so it really was going to the quarterdeck, trying to get back and forth to your room.
That's awesome.
And it happens. And through ours, I think we broke out in February or something like that, where they're like, yeah, you broke out, now you're a real class. And now, you know.
No, that's cool. I think that's cool. I think there's some cool nature to that, because then you're like, you're the team. Your class is a team.
Oh, dude.
Or your group
we
of
matriculated with 300 some odd guys, because at that time it was just dudes. 300 matriculated. I graduated under 100. I graduated 4 years later with under 100 cats in my class.
And were the 100 that you graduated all from your class that you started with?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
I didn't know if like
some of them
other people would
graduated
fall
early.
in.
Some of them had to stay back for a fifth year, but all of them matriculated unless they were. Anyway, there was onesie twosies that had been held back or whatever. But
Sure.
yeah. So you get I still keep in touch with some, my roommates from VMI are all my best friends.
Sure.
You know, they're texting, we send silly texts to each other all the time and videos and stuff. He's a colonel. He's up at Syscom. One was a Leftwich Trophy winner.
Okay. Gunner?
No, he won it when he was a captain,
Okay.
infantryman. He was a super stud. Wouldn't know it looking at him, but yeah, I mean, so yeah, you keep those bonds forever with the guys you were in school with.
No, yeah, for sure.
Kevin Trujillo, who was our class president, just commanded a special forces group, and now is working at he's in some staff job up at the Pentagon, but
Is he in Det One?
No, he's a USASOC guy.
Okay.
He's an Army dude.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, a lot of great guys and a lot of good Marines. In fact, I just found out that Al Gray was trying to get VMI to be our Marine Corps Academy. Along the ranks of the Naval Academy and the Military Academy and the Air Force Academy, he wanted VMI to be the Marine Academy, because there's a lot of Marine-esque feel to VMI. It's very Spartan. Mm-hmm. The barracks were there was no AC. The heat was run through a radiator that we had to sit a coffee can with water on just to get a little humidity.
Yeah.
In the summer, it's brutally hot. In the winter, it's brutally cold. We wore wool uniforms. We were one of the few non-military academies. I think maybe the only non-military academy that can fix bayonets in our parades, because we actually served in combat during the Civil War. We lost 10 Newmarket cadets. Lost 10 cadets at the Battle of Newmarket, which we celebrate every year.
I never heard that.
Yeah, it's we still have cannonballs in the side of our barracks from when. Anyway, I won't get into the Civil War, but deep, rich history. Puller supposedly went there for a little while until he was like, I got to go serve in the war,
Yeah.
George Marshall, General Marshall, he was our most distinguished graduate. So just a lot. Stonewall Jackson taught there.
Just deep history.
Deep history, dude.
Yeah,
and you live it. And for somebody like me that just loves that type of stuff,
Yeah.
like I'd walk down to the museum and just walk through it between
Yep.
classes, just to
Yep.
little sorrels down there. Stonewall's horse, it is stuffed in the down there. You can't get away from it at VMI. It's just everywhere.
Yeah. That's the culture.
And then you get all the cool stuff, like all the ghost stories and shit like that.
Yeah.
It's like, and there's still like a weapons cache buried under the parade ground. We're gonna go find it tonight. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Where it was, it's just a really super cool school. It's worth a trip because it's gorgeous, especially in the fall when the leaves turn.
Sure.
And the Shenandoah Valley and the Appalachian Mountains are just at their best.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, you go up there, and then you're in the middle of Lexington, Virginia, and it butts up against Washington and Lee, which is kind of like Ivy School feel.
Yeah.
Whatever that means anymore. But anyway, and then you drive in, and you feel like you go back in time.
It's like a different land.
Yeah, but it's all super cool. So, yeah, Fork Union, graduated, got accepted to VMI, and
made it through your rat semester.
I had a point 8 something GPA after my rat year. I mean, it was
had to pick it up after rat year.
Every year was summer school, double class. I was fighting my way through.
Yeah.
But to your point or your question earlier, like what was your track into the military? It was, I was gonna get out, I was gonna graduate, and I had my application into the hometown fire department. I was gonna be a paid firefighter.
Oh, okay.
And then the girl I was dating my senior year, and trust me, I got a lot more stories about school, but we can get into later. But anyway, a girl I was dating my senior year, she broke up with me, and I was like, you know what, screw this. I was like, bucket list starts now. I mean, I can remember back before cell phones, I can remember we had pay phones down in the basement of the barracks or in the PX, and you'd have to go. I remember being, because down in the basement they had these phone booths that they had installed, like literally, like pulled them off the street. It was, but it was all phone booths because you wanted a little bit of privacy. So you'd go in and you'd shut the phone booth and have a little chair. And I remember, and you could kick your feet up on the wall. And I remember standing there and she's like, I don't think it's working out, man. I think we just need to break it off. And I'm like, is that what you want? She was like, yeah, that's what I want. And I'm like, fair enough. Later. And I hang up the phone. I'm like, done. I'm like, bucket list. Let's go. Let's start it. And I was like, I'm going to do everything I even thought about. Like if it was maybe I should do that, I'm doing it. Mm-hmm. Next day I called the recruiter in town.
That was it.
I called the enlisted recruiter and I said, hey man, when can you get me down to Parris Island? First thing steaming. He's like, what? I'm like, he goes, what? Let me come meet with you. I'm like, cool. I'll be here tomorrow in the PX. See you then. Mm-hmm. Hung up the phone, called the OSO, the officer selection officer.
Who's going to get me first?
Who's in Roanoke. And I'm like, hey, brother, sir, at the time I got, who I circled back and served with after I got in the Marine Corps. Funny story. I said, hey, sir, I'd like to meet with you the following day. I said, I'm going to go to boot camp and I'm going to do 1 year in the Marine Corps. And then you got me and I got to go to OCS. And he was like, all right. Let's make it through boot camp first. Give me a call when you graduate. And but he took all my information, and his gunny, he was a captain at the time. His gunny was like, yeah, I'll track you, but call me when you graduate, and call me when your perspective maybe changes a little.
Yeah.
You know, they're very skeptical, right?
Sure.
But VMI was a feeder, and the OSO was a VMI graduate.
Okay.
So he was like, well, clearly, if he's made it 4 years in the school, he's got some stick-to-itiveness or grit or ruggedness, to steal Daly's book there title. Clearly he's got some sand. So let's see what happens. So they followed me, but literally I graduated May 16th, 1998, and June 6th, 98, I was standing on the yellow footprints.
Boom.
Yeah, done. And to be honest, probably wasn't a good move for me, because strangely enough, though, he was like, what MOS do you want? I was like, I don't give a shit. I was like, the first thing that can get me down there as fast as possible. And he goes, how about motor T? And I'm like, cool, my dad was a motor T operator. And he was like, fair enough, you're going to be a motor T guy.
He's like, bet.
Yeah, he's like, you're going to be a motor.
That's exactly the boat space I needed to fill.
He went home and drank a six-pack. He's like, my day had never gone that easy.
This was easy.
Yeah. It's like, no, doesn't have to worry about drug pops, nothing. You know, it's like, because VMI, you know.
Now, this was enlisted. To go to boot camp as enlisted? Or no? Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Trust me, you're not the only one who's like, what the fuck were you thinking?
Yeah, okay.
My granddad,
I'm good. I'm just
when he came up for my graduation, this little Greek man, who at the time was in his late 70s, maybe early 80s, he goes, now let me get this straight. You're going to graduate from college, and you're going to enlist in the Marine Corps? And he retired senior chief, old school senior chief, which I'll tell you why I became fascinated in tattoos. Had a lot to do with his neighbor, E.B. Littlejohn, who was a retired Navy chief too, sailor, Jerry era type chief. You know, he goes, and I said, "Yeah, Granddad, that's what I'm going to do." He goes, "Are you out of your effing mind?
Yeah, are you stupid?
Why would you do that?" And my dad, a Marine, was like, "Dad, I told him." He was like, "I don't know what he's thinking." He goes, "Trust me, Dad, I've told him if you're going to go in the military, go somewhere where there's a soft rack and hot chow every night." Yeah. And he didn't listen to me.
Yeah, you never do. Yeah. I wouldn't have either.
Yeah, well, at the time there was no MARSOC, right?
Yeah.
And Recon Heartbreak Ridge, which is still one of the best and I think pretty accurate depictions of Marine unit. Heartbreak Ridge was the only form of reference that I had. I didn't read a whole lot. I wasn't a military history. You know, I was a history major in college, but focused more on early American history and Civil War and stuff like that.
Sure.
I took Marine classes, but funny story about that. Again, no intention of going into the Marine Corps, but my dad was a Marine, so you had to take a military science class every year. So I stayed in the Marine classes because they were a whole lot cooler and easier
Sure.
than any of the other classes, Air Force or Army. I was in Navy my sophomore year. I got stuck in a Navy science class, and they started talking about sonar, and I was like, oh, I got to get out of this thing.
It's not my juice.
Like,
not my juice.
I was like, sonar? I was like, who the hell wants to know about sonar? And so in the Marine Corps classes, in my junior year, we're sitting in class. It was the 90s, dude. All right, so don't judge me too hard.
No judgment here.
I had gotten frosted tips in my hair.
All right, I'm kidding. I'm judging.
Yeah. And that was cool in the 90s, It was a lot of boy band stuff going on then or whatever. And
Boy, and you were in the punk scene.
yeah.
So you were in that side of it anyway already.
And I had already gotten my first tattoo, And that was back when nobody had tattoos, bruh.
Yep.
Nobody. I got my ass handed to me wrestling in high school by a dude who I knew I was getting my ass kicked because we were warming up on the sides. And it was at a Virginia Beach wrestling tournament, and we're warming up on the sides. I'm like, hey, he's a pretty big dude. It's gonna be tough. And then he took off his sweatshirt and he had a tattoo on his shoulder. I'm like, oh, I'm fucked.
That's a grown ass man.
I'm screwed, dude. I'm screwed. And he did. He whooped my ass. But anyway, yeah. So I'm sitting in class, and Major so and so, because they're all like hardcore. They only send their most hardest Marine officers back to be, the instructors.
Yeah.
And so he's like, Smith hands out a paper. Johnson hands out a paper. Pouleris, nice highlights, hands out a paper. And all of the dudes around me who are like all contract Marines, they're all like, oh, yeah. Dude, can I tell you that most of those guys in that class with me only lasted like one tour in the Marine Corps and then got out?
It happens that way.
It does.
It's a very, let's put it this way. Like, there's some jocks. I was a jock.
Sure.
But I was also on the other, like I had friends of all walks, let's say. But I have come to know like a lot of the Marines, either that I interview or that I served with, they're not locked into that lane. Mm-hmm. They're scattered out. You wouldn't be able to see, like if I showed you 100 guys from a school and said these guys all went to boot camp, I think most people be wrong about the people they picked that would do well or that would do the best, right?
Yeah.
Because you would think that it's always that guy that's chisel cut and he looks good, he's got the right jeans.
Dude on the recruiting poster.
Bro, but sometimes it's that guy. Most of the time in my experience, it's not that guy.
Yeah.
That guy is usually 6'4". He's never been hit in the jaw in high school. Nobody ever fought him. He was always, he had a pretty good network and like there's not a whole lot of, let's call it emotional resilience in people that had it easy. Mm-hmm. But you had that little wiry kid who was maybe doing this to prove something to his dad or maybe doing something to prove this to himself or, didn't have anything to go home to and grew up on the other side of the tracks, let's say. A lot of times it's like that guy's never going to make it, and then that guy's the honor graduate because he's got the fucking grit, and the tenacity to say there is nothing else. This is what I said I was going to do.
Yeah,
there's nothing else going to, and so it's always cool for me to see that because it's the people that are unsuspecting sometimes that you're like, even in combat for me, there were guys in the rear that were like, problem child. Gotta tell them every fucking thing 3 times. It's like whatever. And then in combat, they click into that training boy, and you're like, who the fuck is this? Where have you been?
Bruh.
So you know what I'm talking about,
dude,
though.
We had him in spades at Second Force.
Yeah.
Where it was like, this was the sergeant major was like, this is my personal assistant because I've got to keep him within hand's reach in garrison because if not, he's going to get in trouble.
He won't be with us. He'll be in trouble.
But when we went to Iraq, it was like, take that guy, the problem child, okay, you're going to get on a helicopter and you're going to go set up this thing all the way over on the other side of the province and you're going to do this thing. And he shines like a freaking diamond. I mean, and he becomes that go-to guy. Bring him back to the rear and he's just a freaking
Same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah. So were we in college?
We were in college.
Yeah. I'm going to boot camp.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. And which.
So hold on. Let me understand this. Just I need a little pre and a little post.
Yeah.
You got your college education.
Yeah.
Now you're going to enlisted boot camp.
That's correct.
Your plan is to do a tour enlisted and then talk about being an officer, or is there a program that lets you do?
That's why I called the OSO right afterwards.
Okay.
I was like, hey, when I get back from boot camp, and I had to do contractually, I had to go to boot camp and graduate. Then I had to go to MCT because I was a trucker.
Motor T.
Yeah. So when you guys went to what is called ITB, I guess now.
Yep, Infantry Training Battalion.
Yeah, when you guys went on the infantry side, all the support guys went and did
MCT.
their 4 weeks or 3 weeks in the field or whatever.
Yep.
I did MCT. I had to graduate there.
Yep.
And then I had to go to MOS school.
Probably Missouri, right?
Fort Leonard.
Oh, I know, baby.
Fort Lost in the Woods.
Fort Lost in the Woods.
Missouri.
Yeah.
And I was an LVS operator, which is the Dragon Wagon.
Okay.
Yeah, so I spent Humvee school. I spent, at that time, 5-ton school. And then I went to LVS school. The only license that I didn't have when I left Fort Leonard Wood was like the lowboy for the LVS
wrecker.
and the wrecker.
Yeah.
That's the only 2 licenses I didn't have. So I was schooled out motor T wise.
But that's good that you can then leverage yourself into positions that people that didn't have certain licenses could, right?
Yeah, but I was a reservist, so I did my first tour of duty in Roanoke, Virginia. There's an engineering, I think it's Bravo Company, 4th Engineer or something, reserve station. They're all engineers, not one LVS in the whole motor T lot.
Boy.
It was 1 5-ton there was a salty corporal that was in the Gulf War, and that was his truck. Nobody else touched it. And then there was an active duty staff sergeant on staff there in motor T to take care of all the other. All I did all day was PM vehicles.
Yeah.
And bust rust on a freaking gas can.
Welcome to motor T, huh?
And welcome to being a freaking PFC in the Marine Corps.
Yeah,
at 22 years, that's what I'm saying.
And you're an old boot.
Yeah.
So, and like there's okay, so like for leadership, generally when I was leading, I liked old boots.
Yeah.
The old boots had a little life experience. They had a little maturity about them. You didn't have to worry so much about them doing stupid kid shit.
Yeah.
Was that kind of your experience or no?
Yeah, I only did like 2 or 3 drills before they had me going to OCS.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't stay very long. I never really went to the field with them.
So was that the contractual agreement? You graduate from boot camp, you go to the reserve station, and then you're guaranteed to go to the OCS? Is it something like that?
Not guaranteed. That was the plan.
Okay.
And I just stuck my nose to the grindstone, and that is what we planned out between me and the OSO, and he made it happen. And then literally, like, he got my orders after 3 drills. He got my orders to OCS in Quantico, Virginia, and then I was off to the races as an officer. But the problem is I'd graduated VMI with with all due respect, I graduated. My mentality was like at an officer level. It was like at a corporate type of level. And then what happened was I had to kind of put that on the back burner and then go to another level to be a PFC.
Like digress back a little bit.
It set back my mental progression in a way that was probably not the best. It wasn't detrimental.
No, I know guys exactly like that. Not detrimental, but obvious.
Yeah, and it kind of it wasn't efficient. If I was to put like a word on it, it wasn't the most efficient way of doing it. But I was very idealistic in my 20s.
Yeah.
My father had been an enlisted Marine, and I'd been to VMI where there was a lot of good military leadership, but I was like, I need to be led before I can learn how to lead. Yeah. I had a lot of
I get it.
A lot of respect for the Marine Corps. My father was like an old school 60s Marine, so I heard all the stories about boot camp. I kind of wanted that experience at Parris Island. I wanted to say that I've swatted sand fleas and sat on the rifle, that type of stuff. So there was like that attraction to it. But I was very idealistic. I was like, I want to be led before I know how to lead. Is there something to that? Sure. But it wasn't. The
thing that they don't tell you is that officers are led through the beginning of their careers too. So it's not like are you way closer to making detrimental decisions for somebody else's life earlier? Yeah, depends on the op tempo, but yeah, probably. Yeah. But man, yeah, you guys get led too, and I think I like the leadership that officers go through and the education that they go through.
The Marine Corps does it right, man.
I think they do it with the officers better than they do the enlisted.
I didn't have any contact with an officer almost, period, until I hit the fleet.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Actually, no, I take that back. Until TBS.
Oh,
it was always all of my drill instructors at boot camp. So senior drill instructor Sergeant Lanham
enlisted
was a sergeant, and the rest of them were sergeants.
Yep.
We won initial drill and we won final drill, and it was because they all had staff sergeants. All the other platoons were staff sergeants. And then all of our drill instructors were sergeants. They were so proud. They were awesome. Lanham is still like,
Fuck yeah.
I saw him in the fleet. And I'm
Sergeant Major Lanham?
Probably. Yeah.
I think there was a Sergeant Major Lanham that took over 3-6.
He kind of looked like Freddy Krueger.
That's him!
Yeah.
Yes, he looked like he was burnt up.
Dude.
I don't think he was, but
You want to talk about hardcore?
he was a good guy. And the guys, I mean, I didn't have too much experience with him because as soon as we came home from Marja, I was going over to be a combat instructor, so I had some schools going on, and I was gone for a lot of like the change of command and stuff. But out of the new command, my Marines said that they like he was the one they liked out of the ones that they.
You could tell. You could just tell. I've got a picture of me and him walking in the squad bay at graduation day, and that's like one of my most. And like we're smoking and joking. You can tell. Like I'm smiling, he's smiling. We're like kind of casually walking down the squad bay. And it's like one of my most cherished pictures because I'm like, I was the scribe. So I got to know them kind of well.
A little bit better, yeah.
I got a shit ton of boot camp stories that over a couple more coffees or something. But yeah, but he was great, and Jackson was great, and James, Sergeant Jackson, they were all great.
So tell me this: how did, and we're going to move forward a little bit here, but how did enlisted boot camp measure up to OCS?
Nowhere.
It's not even close. Okay, now I want you to go in because I think it's proper that there's a difference, but I want you to go into the differences of.
Yeah. So everybody knows boot camp. There's a lot of because you're taking basically a child, an 18-year-old kid, and so you gotta. They didn't beat us.
You came in before me. You don't have to lie for the Marine Corps. Hey, get some motherfucker like you're going to go kill people. Look, like it's you gotta change them.
So they knew me. They knew I had college in me. They could. That's why I was the scribe. They trusted me. So there was a little special attention paid to me. They didn't give me guide. I was like guide for like 30 seconds one time, but they gave the guide. I forget his name. I got a funny story about him, but his father was a Marine major. They gave him the guide because he was active duty. He wasn't going to be a reservist.
Right, that makes sense.
And he was like an infantry contract.
Yeah.
So they were like, you're going to be the guide, and you're going to be the scribe because I can trust you to put together our daily schedules.
Sure.
I know you got some school, and guide. You're the hardcore. And he was a good dude. And I hope he's made it through his career without any really bad issues because he was a good kid.
Sure.
His father sent you do mail time on the quarterdeck, and his father sent him a package one day. Giant Head and Shoulders bottle of shampoo, and Jackson, wildly animated dude, he goes, oh no, he goes, God, get up here. He's like, and bring a pencil with you. We're all like, bring a pencil, and he's like, turn that shampoo bottle upside down, and he took the pencil and he shoved it up in the shampoo bottle, and peanut M&Ms just started falling out of the shampoo bottle onto the ground.
God.
And he was like, "Oh, everybody get online! You're all pushing while the guy
and
eats
his dad
every
was a
one of these
Marine?
M&Ms." Yeah, his dad
he did that shit on purpose.
Absolutely.
That wasn't even trying to get the first neck.
And Jackson's like, "You tell your dad. I tell you what. Next time you write your dad, you tell him that shit ain't gonna fly here. We know exactly what the deal is." And it was great. I loved it. Boot camp was great. But as far as comparison to OCS is a lot more, obviously, physical and mental. You're running like there's a much higher, although, dude, I'm not putting anything against Marine Corps boot camp. Marine Corps boot camp, you get physically strong, right? Like my buddies from college came to my boot camp graduation, and they were like, dude, where's the belly? I'm like, I got in good shape.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting time.
Would you say more gentlemanly, more gentlemanlike?
OCS?
Yeah.
No, it's kind of from my perspective, it's still kind of like that factory of like we're pushing people through,
putting the product out. Yeah.
But it's much more highly scrutinized.
Yeah.
Like we did I think we did peer. Did we do peer evaluation? No, I think that might have just been in TBS. But like the sergeant instructors up there were like very much watching everybody and evaluating everybody all the time.
Sure, yeah.
There was always eyes on you. My OSO came and like checked me out of the platoon at one time. He was like, "Hey, I heard you're doing okay. Keep up the good work." And I got crazy sick in OCS.
Now I read that in your thing. Go into that. What was that about?
So, Quantico, Virginia, in the middle of the summer, we did the sea bag drag June 6th. So 1 year to the day I'm on the yellow footprints. I'm at OCS doing the sea bag drag across the grinder to our barracks. Hot, blazing hot, dude. I still, to this day, think Quantico, Virginia has been the hottest and coldest I've ever been in my life. It's bananas. But, yeah, wildly hot. And so the water treatment plant, something happened to the water treatment plant on Quantico. And so they were bringing in water bowls for all of our drinking water. Mm-hmm. And then they were hyperchlorinating the water in the water bowls. And it tore my stomach to hell.
Are you like allergic or something?
I think it just destroyed all of the good bacteria in my gut.
Oh.
And now I have been diagnosed later with a gastrointestinal problem that might have been sparked by that, but for whatever reason, I was just highly sensitive to it.
Okay, check.
I kid you not, I would wake up before Reveille, and I'd get in the head, and I'd try to evacuate everything. And I was in the head. It got so bad that my sergeant instructors were like, I'd be like, hey, sergeant instructor. He's like, God. He's like, we'd be out on the parade or on the grinder drilling, and he was like, go, Pouleris, go. I know you gotta. Because I just couldn't. It was like straight pipes.
Straight through you.
Straight through me, dude. I would go out on a run because there's individual effort runs. I'd go out on a run and I'd come back with one sock on. And sergeant instructor would be like, Pouleris, you take a shit in the woods? I'm like, Sergeant, I can't help it, man.
Yeah,
I'm like, and I couldn't hold anything down. Now, shout out and shouts out to every freaking corpsman out there, because we were at PT one morning and they were literally, I mean, they were considering med dropping me because they were like, it wasn't like I was passing out or anything like that, but it was getting in the way of training.
Yeah.
I wasn't failing anything or anything, but it was just getting in the way of training. So we're at PT one morning. Corpsman comes up to me. He's like, hey, are you still hurting? I'm like, man, I'm fucking dying.
Yeah.
And he's like, he goes, try this. He goes, when you go to breakfast this morning after PT, eat as much yogurt as you can.
Uh-huh.
He goes, there's active cultures in the yogurt.
Trying to get that bacteria
and it'll get that bacteria back in. As soon as I came out of that chow hall, not one problem did I have the rest of OCS. But I went from probably checked in at 205, checked out at 176.
Yeah, that's losing some weight.
Dude, I was, and yeah, it was pretty brutal. But as far as the comparison from one to the other, so scholastically, there's a lot more. You did recruit knowledge, in boot camp, where you're learning the grand old man of the Marine Corps and stuff like that, and what a squad is and what a fire team is. It's more tactical. You're learning. It's not crazy tactics, but you're learning how to lead a fire team. Yeah, I mean, we actually one of the and I can't remember. I know everybody's probably going to be screaming into their freaking phones at me, but I can't remember all the names of all the events they had us do. But there was like you were evaluated on like a fire team movement to contact, where you were given
like alternate the leadership position.
Exactly, like you were patrol leader, and so there was a lot of that. But then it's always around some sort of stressful environment that you're in. Very rarely was there not I mean, we were in the classroom at some points, but it's all like putting you into the grinder and seeing who makes it and who doesn't. Because there were people that were dropped from my OCS class that didn't graduate with me, that like you could clearly see some of them didn't need to be in the Marine Corps as an officer, and some of them were just like they weren't getting it.
Mm-hmm.
And so
needed another iteration.
So again, whereas in boot camp, as long as you keep your integrity strong and you don't get hurt and you put out, pretty much you think, boot camp, it's going to be rough.
You're gonna get
and
it.
As long as you do well in the rifle range.
Need that.
Because you need that. But it typically, as long as you hit all those markers and you're going to make it through, right? Mm-hmm. OCS, there was a big feeling, at least I felt, like some of you look to your left, look to your right. Some of you aren't going to make this, and that's fine, because not everybody can be
supposed to.
Not everybody can be an officer of Marines, and this is being told to us by staff NCOs.
Yeah.
Again,
and they know.
Oh yeah.
Like, come on, like and I know now that we walk in and look at these guys for a week and a half, 2 weeks training. You're going to know who's going to struggle hard, who's going to struggle well.
But the cool thing about my OCS platoon is in the squad bay, like you had all the way up to the duty hut where the sergeant instructors hung out. Mm-hmm. You had all guys that no military experience at all. And then when it got to, I think, my rack or the rack right before me, to the last like 6 racks all the way down, it was all prior enlisted guys.
They did that shit on purpose, yeah.
Probably.
Their idea where
because, you're at. Yeah. And so there was everybody. I think I had a staff sergeant, a gunny, a sergeant, guys that had been like, now again, this is before 9/11. Guys had been on deployment. One guy was in Cuba for a while, so that was all.
Salt dogs.
Yeah, you think, yeah. Oh my God, you went to Cuba, what's
No,
it?
and that's at the time, that's what they had. So it's
That's
no
all-
shade. I'm not throwing shade.
Bruh,
I'm just saying.
that's all you had.
Yeah.
So OCS was tough.
Yeah.
TBS was pretty freaking brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, I had guys that were like miserable because they didn't get picked for infantry.
I can imagine. I can imagine if that's your goal and that's what you aspire to and that's what you're fighting for. Yeah, that would be a letdown if I didn't, attain that. But that's how it goes. Now,
for me, I wasn't that laser focused on any of MOS. I was just trying to get through. Again, it was just like high school. I was in the middle of TBS going, am I going to freaking make it through this thing?
Yeah.
Because the academics were so high too.
Now, when you're learning academics were high.
Yeah, you're like learning about the effective range of a TOW missile.
Yeah. So you're talking about tactically and historically, or are you talking about TBS is mainly tactically driven?
There's very little, from what I can remember, and here's the other disclaimer from my memory. Let's all call it for what it is. Ain't the best.
Yeah.
But from what I can remember, very little history, whole lot of tactics.
Yeah.
I
mean, that's good. The basic school should be that way.
And then not only tactics, but we had to learn the entire JAG manual. We had a open book test on the JAG manual. We had to learn about all the little things that you don't even think about, counseling Marines and medical,
but important.
All important.
Just
you're
like when you say,
you're always being tested. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Not only are you being tested and have to pass in the classroom, but then we're doing peer evaluations on each other in the platoon. So your peers are going, this guy's I think it was 1 out of 5 or whatever. He's like a 4 out of 5 or something. So you were always being evaluated. And I was, again, I'm having to really look at myself and going, hey, this isn't a cakewalk.
Yeah.
This isn't some bullshit. There wasn't a war firing off.
Yeah.
But you got to step up. And this isn't going to be just like, hey, I'll do 4 years in the Marine Corps. I'll get out, I'll travel around and get out and I'll have a great experience. No, it was like, no, you're going to be a rifle platoon commander. And here's the funny thing is when I was enlisted and when I went through my entire officer training, all of our instructors were like, the big one's coming. The big one's coming. I can remember the guys in Fort Leonard going, listen, you need to know this shit because the big one's coming. We haven't had one since Vietnam or the Gulf War. They were like, the big one's coming. Little did we know.
It was coming.
That bitch was closer than we thought.
Yeah, it was coming.
Because, dude, I got through TBS. I think they did it in thirds. I was in the bottom third of my class. I got picked for comm, which to me, I was like, it sounds like it could translate to the civilian world, so why not?
Yeah.
So I did my 7 months in TBS and got through it, thankfully. A lot of hard work, a lot of struggling. I did and I will quote my SPC at TBS, this is the worst ambush patrol I have ever seen in the time that I was at OCS as a student or at TBS as an instructor or a student. This is the worst ambush patrol I've ever seen.
Oh, man.
We started.
And you were the leader for this?
I was the patrol leader.
Boy.
It was, I forget how long it was. It was only like 3 kilometers or something to the ambush point. Anyway, again, I hadn't done my homework. And so we went out to the field, and this was D week. So that they split half the company. I think, again, from what I can remember, half the company was in the offense, half the company was in the defense, and then they waited like a month or so, and then it was the other way around. Half the company was in the defense, the other company was in the office. So you get to learn like how to set up a defensive perimeter and do your defensive security patrols and stuff like that, and then you learn how to do like large movement contact on offensive.
Absolutely.
Funny story, during my O week, I actually fell asleep in 6 inches of snow at 3 o'clock in the morning doing a movement to contact.
Oh, man.
It was pretty impressive. But back to the ambush patrol, I'm sitting there in my fighting position, and I think it was my SPC or somebody. They called me up to our little CP or whatever. He's like, hey, you're going to lead an ambush patrol. Go up to the hooch up on top of the hill to get your patrol order, and then come down. Your team is pick the team out of your squad, and then let me know when you're ready, and we'll conduct the patrol. And I was like, oh shit. I was like, I didn't know the first thing. I was like, I didn't. It was so bad. He made me teach the class to my entire platoon on a Saturday morning,
so that you could get better
as remedial.
Yeah.
He was like, not only am I going to punish you, I'm going to punish the rest of your platoon because
they're going to punish you later.
So bad. I was like, damn. We left at 15:30. We left at 3:30 in the afternoon, and we got home at like 3:34 in the morning from that patrol. It was we could go on for the rest of the time we have tonight talking just about that patrol, but it was terrible. It was horrible.
Suffice to say, it was bad.
Suffice to say, again, I didn't prepare enough, and I learned from it. And
Yeah.
I was like, if I had to do this in real life, I have got to know what the hell I'm doing. Because I just showed my ass to everybody in my platoon. I almost got recycled probably just off that evolution. My SPC for some reason, he saw something in me. But I learned. And you know what? That kind of theme goes on and on and on through my career. But thankfully, I was just good enough. And sometimes, I was never a rock star. But I was always learning these lessons to prepare me for the next challenge. And that next challenge, I was never as prepared as I should have been, which probably we all feel. But then something, that would happen. And thankfully, nothing that really occurred, even though we lost guys in Iraq and Afghanistan. I'll just leave it at that. A lot of learning occurred. So that was 7 months in Quantico. So now I've spent a cumulative, 11 months in Quantico. And then I get selected for comm school, which is another 6 months in Quantico. So I spent
fun.
a shit ton of time in Quantico. Go through comm school. Comm school, again, was freaking academically, it was rough.
Rough, yeah.
Because at that time, the internet and the web was, busting loose, and that was the new hotness in the future.
A lot to learn for everybody.
A lot of digital. We spent enough time, but we spent a ton of time on moving data across the battlefield, and not so much on HF radios and VHF radios, or Mark 142. It was I was more on Mark 142s and pushing data, because everybody was seeing this is the thing that's coming. But like I said, when I hit the fleet, 9/11 still had not happened. So once 9/11 happened, and those war coffers opened, and we needed to modernize the fleet, that freaking technology hit the Marine Corps, and I saw that thing went straight up.
Now, where were you when 9/11 happened?
Okay, so graduate comm school. The funny story is, again, wasn't the rock star in comm school academically. All my peers knew it, but then the sheet comes up of all of our duty stations, and who's the only one that gets a MEU?
You?
Me. And everybody's like, Pouleris, what in the hell how did you get a MEU? I go, I don't have any idea. MSSG 2424 MEU. Dave Pouleris was assigned, which again,
Now, what's that mean?
That means my first duty station, where I was checking in. See, at that time, everybody wanted to go to a Victor unit or a MEU. And Victor unit was we're on the bubble, just in case the balloon goes up, we're the ones flying out, right? Or a MEU, it's we're going on deployment.
And if it happens, you're there.
Exactly. So
I would see where that would be the thing to try to get to.
Yeah.
At the time.
Because it's the only thing, other than that, you're going to, I guess there was Rolling Thunder, was an exercise in Bragg. There was something up in Norway. I forget what that was called. But other than that, you're going out in the field in Camp Lejeune.
Yeah.
And
if something happens, if you're on the MEU, you're the closest
right there,
to
brother.
be acting
right
to
there.
it. Yeah. So check. Okay, so you get the MEU. And
so I check into 2nd Force Service Support Group, which is now the MLG. I checked into there, and they were like, "Oh, you're going to the MEU? Okay, well, here's your stuff back. Here's your orders back. Go to that building over there." And so I checked into the MEU, and we were underway. I don't know. It was not long. We did a huge workup. It was super awesome. A lot of field time.
Now, if you're a comm guy, what does field time or workup look like?
Yeah, so
because I got comm guys that watch this, or aspiring Marines. What would they like? What is expected, at least of the officer side of things, for that workup?
So I was the S6 Alpha for the MSSG. So I had Jason Hamilton, who again Citadel guy, but he was awesome, and he was the actual. He was the 6. So he was the communications officer for the MSSG, and I was his alpha. So basically, he was like, "Hey, you're going to be the platoon commander."
Yeah, basically.
But when we actually got on float, we ran split ARG ops. So I was on the big deck, and the big deck would go one direction, and the 2 little decks would go the other direction. So he was like, "Hey, brother,
if you got that one,
you've got that." And so what the MSSG did is we were logistical support to the ground combat element, the infantry guys, the battalion on the boat. And not to the air wing. They had their own little
yeah.
But we were in direct logistic support to anything that happened. So you're talking like I think they called it ROPU ops, like making fresh water out of salt water. So making clean water, setting up buildings, medical support, dental support.
Yeah, you need comms for everything.
Transportation support. So yeah, the battalion had its own comm det. So what I did was I outfitted all of our logistics guys with communications. So it was just basic communication support for when we were on the ship. It was comm support between
now,
the
when
ships.
you say ARG, you're saying ARG as an amphibious ready group,
correct.
Right?
The three amphibious ships that go as part of the strike group or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah. So the 3 ships that carry Marines, I was on the big deck, which is an LHD, which carries the Harriers and the helicopters, and the little decks that have, and we had the LCACs.
Yep.
We didn't have any LCUs. The 2 little decks, the Ponce and the Carter Hall, they had LCUs. They had limited air. I think they had like a helicopter or 2 apiece. And then.
So I was just trying to say that for the audience, for people who didn't understand ARG, amphibious ready group. You got a number of ships out there, and that's kind of like your landing force, your Victor units that are supporting that float for that strike group.
So think about
when the ARG
think
splits,
about Libya. You remember when the awakening, when Libya fell a few years back, and we had to run a trap mission because one of our F-15s or something went down.
Okay.
And it was the first time that an Osprey did a trap mission.
Okay.
And it was like super successful, super fast. That was the MEU that did that mission because they're sitting there off the coast, and we have, Air Force dudes flying over. One gets hit. Pilots need to be recovered. MEU's going after them.
Yeah.
Or an embassy falls. This was something.
That's what happened with me when I worked with, I think it was the 2-2 MEU, I think. But it was when Israel and Lebanon were going at it in 06, 07 time frame.
Yeah.
And I was on a fast team.
Yeah.
And we went over and
it
did...
might have been... It might... Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we went over and did like the embassy takeover.
On the fast team?
Yeah, from our fast element. But there was elements of the MEU and 8th Marines that were already there when we got there.
Yep.
Right. So they came off of the decks. They came in to secure kind of the area. And then we came in to supplement, to run American civilians back out away from there.
Yep,
so.
that's one of the core capabilities or tasks. Again, my terminology is probably a little rusty too. Of the MEU is doing non-combatant evacuation operations. NEOs. And I was on the FCE, the Forward Command Element for, I was a lieutenant, and I had a surreal experience with the XO from the battalion that I was on. We're sitting there staring at the board one day in the FCE because they took the MEU XO, the battalion XO. For whatever reason, they assigned me on the FCE, and we were the first ones that would go in and do all the liaison with the embassy. So we're practicing. We're on an exercise, and this guy called himself Big Duke 6.
Oh, boy.
I mean, he was straight up like what you would see as a stereotypical jarhead Marine. Yeah. Super cool dude. Had a chest full of ribbons before 9/11. Nobody had that many ribbons. We were like, and so we're standing at the map board in this simulated embassy one day. We just got out of a meeting or something. He's like, "Hey, Pouleris," or he said, "Hey, Lieutenant, are you looking to get into the action on this deployment?" I go, "Sir?" He's like, "Yeah, get into the action. Find some action out there when we get on deployment." I said, "Sure, yes, sir." And he goes, "Well, you just stick with Big Duke 6 because Big Duke 6 always finds the action." And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "Dude," I'm like, "Are you real right now?"
Are you talking about yourself in the third person, sir?
Big Duke 6 from Apocalypse Now. I'm like, "Bro, this can't be real."
Yeah,
but it was. Those guys live in the Marine Corps that are just those stereotypical.
Oh, I got
dudes.
buddies that are there.
Yeah. So it was great. I love the MEU. But yeah, so Kosovo was still a thing. I had Marines that had been on the MEU prior because typically you would do 2 deployments with the MEU before you left. And so they had been to Kosovo when it was still kind of hot. It was warm. I think the most combat they saw was people throwing shit at their Humvees as they drove out.
Yeah. Kosovo, though, so I've talked to a lot of guys that were over there. And even though a lot of these guys didn't get shot at and there wasn't some kinetic fight, digging up mass burials will fuck you up.
Oh, yeah.
Digging up mass graves of children and women will fuck you up because I have friends that, guys that have been on a show and guys that just been in that chair talking
Yeah.
without this shit running. And Kosovo mass burials and mass graves are bad on guys that have to be
there was
there.
there was some weird stuff going on when we got into Kosovo, where I was the chief warrant officer who was the head the human exploitation team, det OIC. He was an intel dude, warrant officer. He was the only guy outside of the force recon det or the recon det that had jump wings. So I was like, oh wow, so I struck up conversation. I was like, so tell me, how do I get a pair of this? And they were doing some spooky shit over there, which was kind of cool. So there was still some stuff going on, but the most the battalion did was they went out, they set up their little OPs on the border with Macedonia, I think. Anyway, in our sector, they set up on the border with the other country that bordered our sector, which was, I think, the southern sector. It was my first interaction with KBR and Kellogg Brown and Root, because Camp Bondsteel was like Disneyland in the middle of nowhere. And they had the chow hall, everything was like, I'm like, where in the hell? It was so good that I got back off deployment and I went to my financial advisor. I was like, hey, have you ever heard of KBR? Because I think I want to invest a lot of money in that.
Trying to invest some money in that.
Oh, yeah. And he was like, not knowing Halliburton was like their subsidiary of Halliburton or something. And I should have pushed him harder for that. But anyway, because I saw it. I mean, I'm like, this is like a beautiful
fucking gold mine,
first world city in the middle of a third world country. Who built this shit? KBR. And the cool thing was, though, is they were employing a lot of the locals. You know,
they were
coming into. So it was kind of an economic boost to the area that had been ravaged. But
go to war with America. Tell me that's not the fucking way. We'll rebuild all your shit.
So well, that's a sidebar conversation.
It is.
So we're there, and I can remember it just like it was yesterday. I'm walking out of our CP, and I'm headed. It was nighttime, and I was either headed back to my room or something, and one of our Marines was walking up. He's like, "Hey, sir," he's like, "Stop by the chow hall, check out the TVs. A plane just hit the World Trade Center," or I think he said like Empire State Building or something. And I was like, "Huh?" And he goes, "Yeah, check it out when you go by the chow hall," because that was the only place that had TV that was playing AFN or whatever. And I was and I had thought back to like the 20s or 30s when the plane actually flew into the Empire State Building, and I was like, "Oh, it must have been something like that." Not even registering, like, not nowadays. There's no way a plane would be, in line with one of the buildings in downtown Manhattan. Something. So I got to the chow hall, and that's when it was like, oh shit. And then the second one it hit, and
the whole world knew then.
Everybody's watching. And let me tell you something, man. I'll give credit where credit's due, because we were on an army base for all intents and purposes. It's literally what we were on. They locked that sucker down no time. All the foreign nationals off the base. They had that sucker tighter than a clock. Wound tighter than a clock in no time. It was really professionally run. It was super cool. All the sirens went off, and they were like, "Get up!" And of course, the MEU commander was like, "How fast can you get us back on the boats?"
Back to the ship.
And no shit, we packed our shit, because the MEU commander, Colonel Mills, who retired, Lieutenant General Mills at the time, call sign Giant. He was awesome dude. Just, I mean, I can't say enough about it, but great guy to have as a MEU commander, and he was like, "We got to get back to the ships because it's about to go down."
Shit's on.
Yeah, and so that was at the tail end of our deployment. Got back on the boats, and whatever deliberations took place, they decided to send us home. And then the guys that passed us in Rota, that we did the chop in and out of the med with, they're the ones that went to Afghanistan as part of that initial push into Afghanistan. So
I think that Daly in his book right there writes about that. That first initial Camp Rhino and those first ops. Pretty wild, man.
And to be honest, dude, again, it smacked me and all of us right in the face. You remember in boot camp when they did the scare thing, when they locked all the doors in the classroom and they're like, "Hey," well, it might not have happened for you.
I was going to say, like, I went to boot camp in 2004. Right. The war was underway.
Before there was a war, they had us all in a classroom one day, and they're like, "All right, put your rat knowledge, put your recruit knowledge down." He's like, "We have an important announcement to make. Gunny, floor is yours." He gets up and goes, 07:30 this morning, whatever time.
United States forces.
A North Korean submarine just attacked, da-da-da-da-da. and y'all are being fast-tracked to graduation. Rifle range is going to be shortened. Fast-tracked to graduation, getting you to the fleet. We're at war, man. Or we're at war, recruits.
Yeah.
And, dude, when he said that, I had a kid behind me start crying. People started running
Nobody
for the
was
doors.
coming in for war then.
Oh, they were like, holy shit, I'm out of here. And literally, drill instructors were tackling guys, trying to get out, trying to run out of the... And the kid behind me is bawling. I'm like, hey, man. I'm like, don't worry. I'm like, don't be ashamed. Happens to the best of us. But it smacked him right in the face.
Yeah.
Well, when those two planes hit those buildings and we're out there, a lot of people were like, hey, this is what we get paid for, brother.
Yeah, now it's on.
It's time to make our money, right?
Yep.
And so there was a lot of reflection. Of course, we had been through workups as a MU.
Mm-hmm.
We had been out in the med for a while. We were ready.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll tell you that. I felt more prepared with that group in the support group because we had Lieutenant Colonel Lopez, who retired as a colonel. He was a hard dog, and we were ready, man. We were ready to go to war. It was.
Now you come back from that. The other half takes, goes into Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. What happens next for you?
So we come back, and of course, all the focus. Nobody knew what was going to happen after Afghanistan. So we come back and we just demob, and I go back to my parent unit, 2nd Force Service Support Group. I go back to Comm Company in 2nd Force Service Support Group, and between that and when we went to Iraq, I volunteered for an exercise called Dynamic Mix over in Spain, where they took a MEB, Marine Expeditionary Brigade, and they sent 2nd Marine Expeditionary Brigade, which is commanded by like a 2-star or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's just below a MEF, from what I can remember.
No, you're right so far.
They activated us. They mobilized us from all over the force, from over to MEF, mobilized us and sent us to Spain to do an offload of the pre-positioned shipping, the big gray bottom boats that carry all the supplemental equipment out of the coffers and wherever they are, and all the stuff, sent them to Spain. And what we didn't know at the time was it was a simulation. It was not only to get our forces ready to go to war in Iraq, but we had to offload in Tarragona, Spain. Mm-hmm. We had to put all that maritime pre-positioned equipment, which is a lot of tanks, a lot of fuel trucks, Humvees. We had to put it all on rail.
Yep.
On the railhead, and send it up to Zaragoza or whatever up in central Spain, where the other force, the infantry and everybody else, was flying in after us to do an exercise up there on all this stuff. Then they put it back on the train and send it back down to the port, and we reload it back on the shipping, because what they were doing there, this has never been validated, but this is what I think, is they thought, hey, we're gonna have to do the same thing in Iraq. We offload all this stuff in, I think it's called Basra, which is a port city down in southern Iraq, and then that's how we're gonna flow a lot of logistical stuff.
So it's just like a dry running for that.
It was an absolute dry run for Iraq. Now, whether that was all what they were thinking up in the head shed, at the Joint Chiefs and all that, or the combatant commanders whether that was a plan or not, it was very similar to what we had to do several months later when I was actually trying to go back out on a MU. And before we went to CAX for the MU, they were like, hey, everybody's demobilized. We're folding these colors. You're going back to your parent units because we're going to war. Because it wasn't that blatant, but everybody knew, like, oh, shit, they're demobbing this? Like, okay, and we're all going back. And then it was, hey, I'm taking the comm company to the field because these guys now I've got to take to combat. Mm-hmm. Or what I thought was going to be combat, because we all really didn't know what our piece in the puzzle was.
Pretty fluid at the time.
So, and then I find myself in Camp Fox, Kuwait with 2nd Force Service Support Group, getting ready, several months later, getting ready to go into the initial push into Iraq.
Oh, yeah.
So not only was I in the right place at the right time with the MU, but then I found myself in the right place in the right time with the initial push into Iraq. I didn't make it across the border during that deployment. I spent my time in Camp Fox.
Okay.
But we sent all of our transportation support battalion, plus a lot of like contracted tractor trailer trucking, right behind the guys in Task Force Tower and all that.
Yeah.
I mean, they were right up in the middle of it. Billy Hortman, a good friend of mine, was communication. I think it was Billy. Was assistant communication officer for that transportation support battalion, so he got to go up into it. But yeah, so that was like, I think I left in March, April, but I got back in like June, July. So it wasn't that long.
Short, yeah.
Because obviously it didn't take that long to get to Baghdad for us.
Yeah.
You know, so once we had gotten to Baghdad, and then everybody kind of figured, like, you know,
got a good handle on it.
A month or so later, they're like, all right, let's pack our stuff up down here in Kuwait and head home. And we did.
Yeah.
And got back home. And then when I got back home, I was up for orders.
And you're a lieutenant still at this time?
Yeah, I had gotten promoted to first lieutenant.
First lieutenant, okay.
Yeah, I got promoted right before. I think I got promoted right before I went to Kosovo.
Okay.
Yeah, and while I was out on deployment, I started hanging around some of the guys from the Force Recon Det, because some of them were surfers, and I'm a big surfer, and some of them, like, I saw them, like, they brought some of their boards with them.
Charlie doesn't surf, motherfucker.
Dude, yeah, they proved it in the Med. They were surfing all kinds of mess over there. But yeah, so, you know, we would do beer on the pier and stuff. And
so you're hanging out with these guys. You're liking these guys.
I'm hanging out and finding kind of a kinship of, like, you know, these were the kind of dudes, again, that I kind of wanted to associate myself.
Now, are you hanging out with the enlisted ones?
Yeah.
Or officers alike?
The enlisted kids. Yeah. No, I knew the officer, but he was kind of standoffish. But, you know, I remember one time, because me and the maintenance warrant officer, who's a great dude, who taught me a lot about, one of the things he taught me was, like, pick your battles, brother. He's like, you're going to be in this gun club for a while. He's like, pick your battles, or you're going to burn the hell out. But we used to go out on mountain bikes, and when everybody else would buy the tours and shit like that, we'd just be like, let's just jump on the mountain bike and go out in town and just find something.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and so we kind of linked up. Al had his dive bubble, so they kind of knew Al from, like, hey, man, what you doing with the dive bubble? You're a maintenance guy. So kind of got to know Al, and then I was just associating with Al and kind of associated with those dudes, talked about surfing and everything, and they're like, oh, yeah, we'll see you on Onslow when we get back. We'll be out surfing Onslow. I'm like, all right, yeah, bet. I'll be out there too. Yeah. Met one of my closest friends to this day. I mean, we've kind of lost touch, but Sergeant Major Pete Acosta, FW Acosta, who every PFT for his entire 26-year career was a 300 PFT. The dude was a stud. Yeah. He had been in every major conflict since Panama. He's about 5'3" or 4. We call him the little Mexican general, because he's got his alpha's blouse is, like, very short because he's a small stature.
But his stack is huge.
But he's just got medals everywhere. Yeah. I was in a wedding with him, and we're like, Pete, God, you're blinding us with the glare off your medals, dude. But super cool dude, skater, surfer, punk guy, just like me. We probably tiptoed around, like, having a little, like, inappropriate, not inappropriate in that sense, but, you know, officers and enlisted fraternizing type of thing, because we always surfed together, we hung out, we drank beers together. But he taught me a really great lesson too when we first started surfing at Onslow, because we would surf with civilians at that time could get on Onslow. So there were civilians in our crew, but there was a lot of recon guys, and then there was me. And I was trying to figure out how to get to recon. I was like, oh, it's never going to happen. I'm an officer. I can't, you know, I can't really take select. Anyway, but Pete looked at me one day and he goes, we're trying just to get to know each other, you know, sniffing each other's butts, trying to figure out who we are. And I was like, yeah, well, you know, I used to be enlisted. He goes, hey, sir, you just remember that. You used to be. And I was like, oh, shit. Yeah, you're right. And in that brief statement, it was like, that was one of the best lessons I learned. It's like, you used to be enlisted. You're not part of this club anymore. Remember that. Yeah. Because he expected a lot out of his officers. I remember one time he told me I saluted an officer coming out of the PX and he didn't salute me. And he said, I grabbed him by his collar, and he's like, that's the last time you ever get one from me, brother. He was like, you got to know you carry a lot of responsibility in that rank on your collar. Better live up to it. And that's what he said to me. He was like, remember that. You're not enlisted anymore. So
there's higher expectations of you
much
now.
Higher.
Yeah.
Especially in recon. Where, you know, officers they can bounce in and out, but
now so going forward, how does that happen? Luck or association, or
so I'm none of that. I only had one hookup getting over there. I'll tell you about that. But But yeah, come back. I'm up for orders, and there's a sheet that came out of all the things, and I saw 2D FRC, and then whatever the MCC code was for Force Reconnaissance. And I said, I wonder if that's recon for a commo. So I called my monitor, and I said, hey, look, I'd like to go to recon. He goes, well, you got to go to selection. They have a selection.
Yeah.
I have to get a phone call from the CO saying that they want you. And I was like, all right, well, when's selection? He was like, he was like, basically call over to the, at that time, the company.
Monitor. Yeah.
No.
Oh, it didn't even have that, huh?
Call down to the company and then find out when selection is for the officer position. So I called the XO, and the XO's like, call this guy. He's part of our RIP platoon. And at that time, it was...
Recon and duck pipeline.
Yeah, it was... the RIP platoon was run by Frank Mercer, who I follow through my MARSOC and recon career. And Frank's like... Hey, I'm like, hey, my name's Lieutenant Pouleris, and I'm going for the commo spot. He's like, all right. I'm like, yeah, is there like an in-doc or something I got to take? He's like, be at 10th Marines pool on this day at this time, and we'll see you there. Frank's super cool dude. Awesome guy. Hilarious. Freaking hilarious. But he was, he's putting on a little bit of a show, like, be there at this part in this time. We'll see if you got what it takes, right? And it was me and another guy from my comm company at 2nd FSSG that were going for this spot.
There's only 2 of you.
Only 2 of us showed up.
I was going to ask that, like, how many combos comfortable in their career are going to say, I want to go take a recon pipeline in dock?
Right.
It's probably not a whole lot.
Well, so at that time, before the war really started having an effect on officers, on everybody's career in the Marine Corps, officer's career had a certain path. You had a lot like the enlisted stuff where you have to go to like NCO course and then sergeant's course. But you went to the fleet, then you went to the schoolhouse, then you went back to the fleet, or then you went to a B billet, back to the fleet, back to the schoolhouse.
It's kind of the same for us.
So you had to hit that, and you had to go from the East Coast to the West Coast, do some Okinawa time, do some joint time, know. So there's all these things, and I was like, brother, I couldn't even believe that I made it this far. I'm like, well, screw it, man.
Fuck it. What's the worst that can happen?
Let's stay in Lejeune again. And I got some other good advice where somebody told me, like, look, if you want a billet on the list, make it an easy decision for your monitor. Like, have it all worked out to where you're like...
He doesn't have to do anything.
He doesn't have to do anything except cut you orders.
Well, like, because we're dealing with people, right?
Yeah.
That's what I tell people all the time. Yeah. It's like, you're still dealing with a human being.
Absolutely.
So if you make it easy for the human being to say yes and hard to say no, then, like, that's going to bode for you.
And then at that time, there was a lot of... and don't take this the wrong way. There was a lot for a communications officer. You started, like, you had to start getting nerdy to be successful. Like, you really had to.
No, I get that.
And like, so there wasn't a lot of guys going, no, I want to go to Force Reconnaissance, where there's literally like almost zero data assets at that time. The only thing that the reconnaissance platoons had to move in regards to data was the pictures they were taking from their hide sites. And when they were actually doing reconnaissance, that data had to get back to the rear, so somebody had to make a decision. But other than that, you weren't moving giant pipes of data back and forth across the battlefield like you were doing. So there weren't many people asking to go to Force Reconnaissance. There were just
how's
me
this
and
going to help my career? Yeah.
It wouldn't have helped.
And it's going to hurt. Yeah.
So,
oh, shit. My bad.
We all good? So me and this other dude show up, straight out, PFT, which that guy beat me.
Regular PFT?
Regular PFT, just standard. So that guy was beating me in the run. And because I remember he reached the turnaround point and passed me on
the way back.
Passed me on the way back. I was like, "You better keep running, motherfucker!" I'm right behind you. And, because we were kind of friends, but it was also like a healthy competition.
Yeah, well, both of you won one spot.
So here's where it gets cool. Colonel Riley, who was the CEO of 2nd Force Reconnaissance at the time, he did interviews. He interviewed us both. So we had to do a PFT. Then right after the PFT, it's like drop,
swim,
get right in the pool, and we had to do a full. It was like a modified swim call. It was like come off the plank, or actually no, I don't think it actually jumped off. It was like you got in full camis, and it's a 30-minute tread water.
Yep.
Then you have to take your camis off and make floats. The worst part of that whole thing, though, I mean, the first part was funny because you're doing it with the enlisted guys too.
Yeah.
So like 30 guys or 40 or 50 guys jump into the pool at the same time. Dude, there were some dudes that went straight to the bottom.
Oh yeah. I did the Indoc pipeline in 2006, and it was very much like exactly what you're saying. And the amount of people who struggled to tread water or like just to float boggled my mind.
But the worst part about it was the underwater swim where you
crossover.
Well, it wasn't a crossover perpendicular to the pool. it was longer, but so it went the length of the pool. So it was like three quarters worth of pool length.
Yep.
And they had sunk a traffic cone.
Yep.
Where you had to swim past. Mm-hmm. And Frank, I can remember Frank to this day going, all right, Marines, got to get past the traffic cone all underwater. If you come up, you fail. He goes, and I'll give you one bit of advice. All your oxygen is at the bottom of the pool.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, shit. So that's what I did.
Compress your lungs.
You couldn't push off the wall, and they had dudes there underwater watching. You had to jump straight in, get settled, and then swim. And all I did was I hugged the bottom of the pool.
That's it.
And I remember, like, when they talk about shallow water blackouts and stuff like that.
It's real.
I remember being like, just dying. But I'm like, that cone, I'm getting past that cone.
Did you ever practice for that before?
I did.
Okay,
Eric Jagels was he was in comm company with me. He was a lieutenant commo at the time. He was a prior enlisted sniper. Uh-huh. So he was like, I'll get you in shape. Uh-huh. And so we would run we were on Main Side on Holcomb Boulevard.
Yep.
And we'd run from our headquarters every day over to the pool behind the movie theater.
Yep.
We'd swim. We'd do a run, swim, run almost every day.
Yeah, that's the way.
Yeah, he worked my ass out. And yeah, that's probably what saved me.
Yeah,
if I would have gone in there cold, I'm a good swimmer. I'm a surfer, right?
Yeah, the underwater crossover is not a go-in cold thing, though.
Nah. That didn't. I struggled to find the brick on the bottom of the. You had to go down and get a brick, and I struggled to find it because I went down and I'm looking in front of me, not thinking that this brick is sitting on almost at the wall.
At the wall, yeah.
And so my last bit of oxygen, I turned around and it was a blue brick, and I turned around and I see it sitting right behind me. I'm like, fuck. Grabbed it, brought it up. I was like, man.
Take it to detail, Marine.
Exactly, dude.
So you pass this NDOC, I assume, or no? You do the run, swim, run, and then you have an interview portion.
Yeah. So then, because we were officers, we had to interview with Colonel Riley, who was like the poster. I mean, this guy was super stud.
Yeah.
And had just gotten back from taking Force Recon Company to Iraq. And so
this motherfucker is
everybody.
He's the gatekeeper.
He got like a Bronze Star with a Combat V or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, all these guys had been through the test. A lot of combat experience. Joe Bell, my first. Well, let me get to. So the funny thing is I had the CEO of 2nd Tanks at that time living across the street from me, and we would have neighborhood parties and stuff. And I'm like, hey sir, I'm going to try out for 2nd Force. I go, hey, I don't want any favors, no favoritism. I was like, I'll do fine physically. Like, I was like, but if you could put a call in to Colonel Riley. He's like, I don't think I know him, but I'll call. And so I shit you not, I'm sitting across from Colonel Riley in his office in Alpha 71, interviewing with him, and the phone rings. And he looks over the phone and he goes, hold on for 1 second. And he picks it up, and I can hear over the phone, hey, Colonel Riley, this is so-and-so at 2nd Tanks. How you doing? He's like, yeah, I'm doing all right. He's like, hey, I want to talk to you about a guy I know, Dave Pouleris. He's going to be trying out to be your commo. He goes, uh-huh. And he's kind of looking at me thinking, like, I hope this dude can't hear it. And I can hear him I think he's a great guy. He'd be a great addition to your team. I put 100% endorsement on him, if you could just take that in consideration when you're making your selection. I'm sure you got a lot of candidates. And he goes, all right, yep, thank you. He goes, I'll give you a call back. I'm in the middle of something. Let me call you right back. I don't know if that turned the tide or what, or if I just impressed him with my boyish charm during the interview. But I got it. And yeah, that was.
Did he say did he let you know who he was talking to at the time or no? No. Okay.
No. But I could tell.
Okay, so you get this. You get the pass. Now, was there animosity between you and your guy from your unit?
Never really spoke to him again. But never really saw him again. Yeah. So I don't think there was any animosity. I mean, he was a pretty competitive dude, and I'm sure he did very well in his career. To be honest, he was probably overqualified for the position because he was a very, very smart commo and needed to be in a very, very smart commo billet.
Well, that's why they do interviews,
and I'm not,
right?
And I'm not saying 2nd Force you didn't have to be a smart commo. One of the most brilliant, the 1st Force Reconnaissance commo at that time was Noah Komnick, and he was brilliant. I mean,
well, I think you kind of have to in that era at least a little bit. Yeah.
But you see my point.
Yeah.
Like, his grasses were a lot greener probably at a comm battalion or something where, he could really shine. But I show up, and Joe Bell was my first comm chief, and he had a lot of experience at Anglico, He had actually been medically retired he was a Ranger. He was at 1st Ranger Battalion, or I can't remember which Ranger Battalion, but he was enlisted as a Ranger and then just was a rock star in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
And super smart, hard as nails, very soft-spoken, very quiet, very determined. Had done time at JSOC prior to, he was a communicator at JSOC.
Mm-hmm.
I hope Joe's pretty modest. I hope he doesn't mind that I'm.
So you're learning from this guy though.
I was.
This is your first chief.
But I was also, this was one of the first times where like I'm with like gritty dudes.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of like really skeptical about me, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to just survive.
Yeah.
But we didn't know we were going back to Iraq for a long time. I mean, it was up in the air. And like I checked in, and they had just gotten back from an exercise in down in Key West or something.
Okay.
A dive X down there. And so I'm like, oh well, I guess things are back to normal. Maybe we'll just, I'll get to go to jump school and all this stuff. Little did I know, it's like, oh hell no. Guess what? 4 months. So I checked in June. In August, I landed in Al-Asad.
Hell yeah.
And
what year are we in now?
that was 2004.
4. Okay.
Yeah. And we did. Here's how rough it was. We had to get 2 reserve reconnaissance platoons from Mississippi. I think they're out of Mississippi, to come augment our 1 active duty platoon that Jason Shaba was commanding at that time. So Jason and I circled back around together. Colonel Petranzio, we did a change of command from Riley to Petranzio. Colonel Petranzio had a huge background, like. His father was a great, I think his father was in Korea or some shit. I mean, so anyway, we found ourselves back in Iraq, and we're doing stuff like I had only heard about. We're starting to like go on raids and doing, and they pushed us out to Al Qaim.
Yeah, I worked in the Al Qaim region.
Yeah, and things were.
04, they were rough
starting,
in Al Qaim.
Yeah, it was getting sketchy. The camp right on the Syrian border. Camp Gannon. Gannon had just been killed.
Captain Gannon.
Yeah, he had just been killed, and they had just done a sweep of Husayba.
That's Steel Fist and Iron Curtain, I believe, right?
Iron Curtain was later.
Okay, Steel
There was
Fist,
the
maybe.
first one where they cleared the entire town, and that's when Gannon got killed. I believe that's when Gannon got killed.
3-2
Forgive
and
me if I get
3-6
any
that
of this
did
wrong.
work there. Yeah, shout out to all those guys. Those were hard fighting days right there.
Yeah, and it was austere, man. It was great times. Like you asked for some pictures, man. I was never like
Me either.
I was never a photo guy. I was
Me
never the
either.
one holding the guns and stuff like that. So all the photos that I got from there, because I also really wanted to respect the dudes out there doing the work.
For sure.
Because I was a staff officer. I sent my communicators. In fact, the first communicator killed Ben Ettinger, I believe, at that time. He was a communicator. He was on the MEU platoon, and he had gotten hit by a IED or something on the roadside, survived, got medevaced all the way back to Bethesda, and then something shrapnel jarred loose, and it was just horrible. But he was a communicator, so I'm sending these guys out to do this work, So I was very conscious about knowing my role.
Yeah.
Right. I can tell you that I wasn't ready for that position at that time. Again, I didn't prepare hard enough, but there was also a lot stacked against me. I had 4 months.
Yeah. It's a short period of time to get spun up.
To figure out who this new command was, who the guys were, all the equipment was, how we operated, and then, oh, by the way, 4 months later, I'm in, no kidding, Iraq doing this stuff.
Yeah.
It was trial by fire, out of the frying pan, right into the fire, bro.
Yeah.
A lot of really talented guys. And we had a good deployment. We had a couple casualties during that time. I think 3 casualties during that deployment, to include Ben, I believe. And I've got a whole list of all the guys that had, in some way, shape, or form, I've been connected to and that got killed, that I'd love to share at the end. But yeah, that was a huge learning curve during that deployment. And still have a lot of close guys that I keep in touch with. Worth Parker, who was one of the reserve platoon commanders, he ended up retiring on active duty, came back into active duty, and was one of the key guys helping Petranzio stand up MARSOC and design it. Their relationship started on that deployment, as platoon commander and company commander, you know. And we were a force reconnaissance company being led by a lieutenant colonel. So there's a lot of strange dynamics being in force reconnaissance, man.
Yeah.
But we were doing, I mean, look, I was never an 0321. I was never a badged raider. I went to jump school. I was an 0602. I was a 3533, and I was a JTAC instructor, and that was a weird thing as a
It is. When I read your paperwork, I'm like, wow, it's like a bunch of different.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But I had the opportunity to be in cahoots, for lack of better terms, with a lot of these rock stars and operators that were, you know, just incredible. The ones that write these books like daily, you know, that just had these incredible careers. And so I was very conscious about that, and I respected that a lot, and I treaded very carefully. And but I tried to be the best I could. So after we got back from that deployment, I prepared the shit out of our platoon for the next one.
Isn't it interesting how that happens? I can relate to that on some level. There was always more that I could have done to train my element until I got in combat, until I seen people go into bags and get zipped up. And then once that happens, there's not enough time to train.
Yeah.
Everything when you come back from that changes.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I had one of Corporal Davis at the time. He had gone out with, there was an ODA in Al-Qaim with us, and they had gone on a patrol down to Husayba, down to Gannon, and they got hit with an IED, and I think it killed one of the dudes in the ODA, and it just rocked Ed Walsh, I think was in the Humvee with Davis, who was our Paraloft chief, who, if you want to know where this logo comes from MARSOC, Ed Walsh. And I will stand up in front of anybody because I remember the day he designed that for General Halick. But Ed's a great dude. He's still at MARSOC. I think he's still at the command, last I heard. Great, solid American. Funny dude. Great Paraloft chief. I still call him, he's my jump master to this day. Still, every time I see him, I'm like, what's up, jump master? He's like, hey. I'm like, come on, man. Anyway, yeah, but to your point, when Davis came back, like you could see, like it rocked him. And he was good. He dusted himself off and he continued on. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like it gets real freaking quick.
Yeah.
And you know what, dude? There was very little direct combat other than Schabel's platoon in Fallujah, and Schabel's platoon got chopped down back to Al-Assad to do a lot of good work, and they did amazing work. And that platoon was on point. But we stayed with the two platoons out west in Al-Qaim, and yeah, I mean, there were some tense situations. There was one platoon that we put down in Gannon, or put down in Husayba. They had some pretty intense stuff going on. But all in all, you know, we got through that deployment and got back to the rear, and then did the change of command between Colonel Petronzio and Colonel Montanus.
And now we're talking about 05.
Yes.
Coming up in 06.
Yeah.
In 06
so we deployed in August of 04, got back in like February of 05, and then deployed again in August of 05.
And you go back to?
Go right back to Iraq, to Al-Assad.
Oh, right back to Al-Assad, okay.
Yeah, go back to Al-Assad. And then at that point, a lot of our tactics changed. We started doing a lot of helo raids.
Yep.
So we were getting off the roads and, you know, attacking by the air.
Now, are you with these guys, or are you command center?
No, I was always in the rear. I was the commo, man.
Dude, what's it
like? I did go on one. I think I went on. So again, when we were doing logistical movements, obviously I had to get in the trucks and move with the guys. From one point to the other. So I did a few combat patrols, you know, like that. But I went on like one patrol, it was Force Recon Company in the attack. We were supported by LAR, and we had an attachment of ODA, who had an attachment of ISOF, because that was just starting to get. They were starting to build these ISOF teams, and so we were going into this town south of, I forget what it was, but it's town south of. We were moving across the desert with LAR, you know, kind of protecting us. And they were basically, we were inside their patrol, so they were doing all the navigating for us and a lot of the communicating. And then when we got to the town, they kind of held security for us, and we went into the town and did wasn't really a clearing operator. It was more like a cordon knock.
Yeah, soft knock kind of thing.
Soft thing. And it was a lot of good training, but it was a lot of good working
Operating,
with the ODA and the ISOF guys to
that's
stretch
a cool
their
experience.
legs.
Yeah.
And so I did go on that patrol because I was the CO's communicator.
The
CO's radio operator, because, hey, at the end of the day, all my radio operators were tapped out, and it was like, hey, I need somebody to run the radio for me. I was like, I'll go.
Right.
And so that was, so I went on that patrol, but we would do a lot of cool stuff that, I was doing pretty complex planning. Like I had my CO and Master Guns Wilson, Jeff Wilson, I had him in a CNC, we used a Herc, a refueling Herc as a CNC bird one time.
Okay.
Put up in the C-130. And so I was doing all kinds of cool stuff that I'd never done before.
Yeah. And
integrating with a lot of air. And we did one of the most notable raids that we did was there was this road that ran from basically where Al Assad is, kind of all the way out to the west to Rutba, where I think LAR had a detachment out in Rutba, and it was like a 300 plus kilometer road, highway. And in the middle of it, it was called like 160 truck stop. There was a truck stop in the middle of it for gas or whatever. Well, there was reports that there was a camp, a training camp, just, I don't know, whatever cardinal direction it was, just off the truck stop, where there were a lot of supplies. There were reportedly a lot of supplies, and they were doing regular training of insurgents in that camp. And so we did a long-range helo raid to that camp, and luckily it didn't turn into a gunfight because there was only 2 guys manning the camp, and one of them was in a wheelchair, if you can believe that, because when they got back,
recruitment's rough,
dude. When they got back, the ramp went down on the 53, and our guys started coming out, and one of them's pushing this dude in a wheelchair, and I'm like, they rolled up a guy in a wheelchair? I'm like, what the happened?
That's wild.
But this is the funniest part. So they get out there, and so they're telling us the story during the debrief. They're like, we shit you not, there was a brand new cherry white Ford F-350 super diesel crew cab, like just money, sitting there in the middle of this camp in the middle of nowhere in the desert. Of course, tons of weapons. They had goats and chickens and stuff to feed these cats. So they packed up, they rolled up the 2 guys, of course none of the wildlife, but packed up as many of the significant weapons and intel that they could gather, money and all this other stuff. And then one of the crew chiefs off the 53 was measuring the F-350 to see if they could roll it up in the back of the 53, and they couldn't. So they go, it was the worst sight to lift off from that thing and see. They threw all the weapons into the back of the truck and thermite grenaded the truck. Right. And they were like, we had to destroy this beautiful truck, which was obviously probably smuggled into the country.
100%.
And flew back. And that was one of the wildest, but we were doing super cool stuff that we were innovating at the company level.
Yeah.
And this goes back to the enlisted dudes that had been in reconnaissance for a long time. A lot of the senior staff NCOs that were like, hey, let's do this, let's do that. It was a great experience being with that level of individual again.
Yeah.
And
that's the thing about teams like that, is it's like steel sharpens steel. So when you have and that was my reason for post-Marshall wanting to get over there once I was a combat instructor, is like, to get into the 03 field or whatever field, you have a certain kind of person. And they sacrifice a little bit at boot camp, right? And after that, like, the sacrifice is kind of on them, whether they want to sacrifice and hurt and go through it or not. But then when you get to SF, and you go over to Recon, or you go, now MARSOC, or you go to the SEALs, you go to any of these places, it's taking like the top couple of % out of that would-be field, and then all of them are voluntarily sacrificing themselves for something bigger than themselves, a team bigger than themselves.
Yeah.
And when that happens, it's contagious, because you have alpha guys going in, and they're rubbing up against these other alpha guys that are everybody's trying to get bigger, faster, stronger, kill the enemy better. Yeah. And when you're around that every day, and that is your group every day, is stay fucking hard group.
Yeah.
Oh my God, like, you have to either stay hard or you have to find a new group.
I was in the best shape of my life.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
Every day I would go out in PT, and like I would run the tank trail over to the gym.
Oh yeah.
And then, I was in the best shape of my life because I was like, this is what it takes to be here.
You got to earn it.
You got to earn it.
Every day.
And here's one thing I will brag a little bit about. I had my comm platoon inside the company. Colonel Montanus did he called it the Raging Rhino, and it was like a run, swim, double obstacle course. Actually, it wasn't. It wasn't a swim. It was Zodiac across the bay, or across the little Courthouse Bay area. Mm-hmm. Get out of the Zodiacs, rack the Zodiacs, run to the O course, do a double O course, run all the way back, do as many pull-ups as you could do, and then it was a Humvee pull or GM or whatever.
So just a straight ball kick.
Yeah. And our comp platoon got like third out of the company. I was like, dude.
Fuck yeah.
I was like, hey, and that but that kind of like symbolizes like what you were saying is like, you know, our comm guys, even though, you know, they weren't as, I don't know how you put it. They were a little bit different than like the straight 0320. Although my guys went to ARS and BRC just like a regular kid did, but it was a little different. But that's where I was like, yeah, you see that, guys? We're just as you know. Obviously, it was.
It's a different feel, but yeah, no, I completely see what you're saying. Absolutely.
And I told my guys in the comm platoon, I was like, but this is the standard you have to maintain if you want to be a part of this group.
Yeah.
You can't. There ain't no sandbagging, man.
Yeah.
And which goes to when we started standing up MARSOC, my TO went from like, I mean, it like tripled overnight.
X number of comm guys to Y.
Dude, I had guys checking in on crutches.
Yeah.
Because they were just sending me anything that could fog a mirror.
Everything.
And my Gunny Edelman at the time, great dude. You want to talk about another dude who's got a lot of experience, Gunny Edelman. He was great. But he was like, hey, boy, just don't unpack your shit. Go back to the barracks. I'll have your orders back across the river in the morning because you ain't going to make it if you got a torn ACL and you're checking in here.
No shit, right.
Because I've got to fill. So we filled Fox Company, and then it was on to the next. I got to fill another company full of qualified communicators.
Would you do double or triple your footprint?
Oh, it was easily tripled.
Easily tripled.
So I helped build the communication TE for the MSOC, which was different than the MSOC looks now. The MSOC at the time was, I can't even tell you how many guys. I think it was like 50-some dudes. Mm. And then you had an infantry platoon that was kind of their security force, where like if, you know, they would do the cordon and the guys would go in and do the hit type deal. So it was called the Dasser platoon. And then you had, I forget what they called the infantry platoon. But, I mean, the amount of equipment, they had like 16 GMVs they deployed.
I don't think it's any different now. I think it's only got, like, they get all the stuff.
Yeah.
They get all the stuff.
So when we were built in H1, I think it was H1 the hospital, yeah. When that's where the original headquarters was, when they called me up and they were like, hey, you're the only guy that we have here that knows the comm equipment that's been with Force Reconnaissance, and we're building this thing. Come up here. We got to do do the numbers on the comm equipment. Mm-hmm. And I was just going off rough numbers. They're like, how many 117s? I'm like, I don't know, 1 per team or 2 per team. You know, I was like, 5. Or how many of these? I don't know, 10. You know, but there was
it happens.
There was a science to it, but it was which goes into what I believe. One of the soft truths in SOCOM, you know, there's like 5 soft truths. Mm-hmm. One of them is soft forces cannot be built overnight. Mm-hmm. That's a soft truth. That's like a guiding principle for SOCOM. Mm-hmm. It's like, don't call me to have some sort of solution overnight, because that's not how we do it in soft. Mm-hmm. It takes a while to build this stuff.
Yep.
And dude, we built Fox Company, and give all the credit to Fred Galvin and his boys for doing this. But we built it and deployed it to a combat zone really quick.
Really quick.
Well,
and it was kind of come down from Rumsfeld, right?
Yeah.
Like in the 06 time frame, like you will do this and you don't have, because the way I understand it, the Marine Corps didn't want that. They didn't want to say that they said we are elite. We don't have a special elite. The Marine Corps is elite.
You're absolutely.
And then finally they said, like, you will do this and you don't have an option.
So when I was in Iraq with Colonel Montanus,
mm-hmm.
Colonel Petronzio, my former CO, was mm-hmm. back in the rear building MARSOC, building this FMTU thing, and putting all the kind of the skeleton together where we would put the meat on the bone later. Mm-hmm. And so Colonel Montanus they have this thing called a ROAG every year. It's the Reconnaissance, I don't know what the OAG, advisory group, Reconnaissance something advisory group, where it's all the reconnaissance duty experts come together in Quantico and meet every year.
Yeah.
Infantry guys do the same thing. I too. Every one of the like little special.
They come together for lessons learned and best practices.
Yeah, best practices. How we should do it. What's the vision of recon?
Yeah.
So that year we were in Iraq. Colonel Montanus gets the call, and he's like, boys, when we go home, we're going to SOCOM. And that's what I was telling you earlier when I was like, oh, shit, are we going to move to Florida?
Yeah.
That's all I could think of. And so we knew something was we were going down, that was going to happen. We didn't know how it was really going to happen. He was like, I think I'm going to be able to keep most of the headquarters cats around.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to take most of our platoons. We're going to be left with a couple platoons. And then from that, we're going to build the first MSOC. Really didn't know what was going on, but we knew that 2nd Force would fold its colors, and we would unfurl the 2nd MSOB colors at the time, right? So Colonel Montana sends Master Guns Wilson and myself back to the ROAG in December. And so I shit you not, you want to talk about how the Marine Corps started raging against MARSOC?
Mm-hmm.
All these, like, really, Daly was probably there.
He was Det 1. He was the first team leader, I think.
Yeah, but we were all in this conference area, like this auditorium. And the guy stands up. He goes, all right, our next speaker is Colonel Petronzio, and he's going to give us a brief on this thing called MARSOC. And Colonel Petronzio stands up and he goes, okay, gentlemen, the plan is, basically, this is paraphrasing.
Yeah.
Stands up and says, good afternoon, gentlemen. Basically, so here's what's going to happen. 2nd Force Reconnaissance Company will no longer exist. After they return, they will fold the colors. And then the whole place erupted. Oh, bullshit. No, that ain't, sir, with all due respect, Recon is not leaving the Marine Corps. I don't know what about it. And literally Petronzio goes, I could either finish my brief or I can leave.
Yeah.
But I will tell you this, Force Reconnaissance is going away and MARSOC is being stood up.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't care where all y'all's,
not our choice necessarily either. Yeah.
It's above my pay grade. Don't kill the messenger, but this is what's happening.
Yeah.
I've got it on pretty good authority that that's what's going to happen. And I shit you not, we came home and Montanus cased the colors for 2nd Force Reconnaissance Company and unfurled 2nd MSOB, and we had moved Alpha 66 back where a small boat craft company or small craft company used to be back of Courthouse Bay.
Yep.
We took that over, and they took down the 2nd Force Reconnaissance sign, and they put up 2nd Marine Special Operations Battalion sign, and
that's cool.
And literally overnight we were SOCOM, and it was cool, but it was so. Dude, it was just a freight train that you're just trying to hang on to.
Yeah.
You're going home every night going, holy shit. But it was super cool at the time, too. All right, so to get back to, like, some of the cool guy stuff that I did get to do, this was awesome. I wanted to go to some schools because I've been on deployments. Like, so one of the old crusty master sergeants up in the 3 shop, he was like, you ain't going nowhere till you go to SEER school. And I'm like, fair enough. I'm like, I'll go to jump school later. Sign me up for SEER school. Loved it.
And you're a captain now?
Yeah, I'm a captain, yeah.
Yeah.
They sent me to SEER school up in Maine. I loved it. First time I saw a moose in the wild that I could reach out and touch. Terrifying how big that freaking animal is.
And he'll stomp you, too.
Oh, he'll stomp the snot out of you.
Oh, yeah.
Or whatever it was, he or she. But I loved it. I was like, I came back, I was like, I don't know why they don't send every Marine to this school. This is an amazing, I mean, it's awesome. It's really cool. Came back from that, had to go on deployment again to get another school. Went to a driving course that was bananas. Finally went to jump school, which is, the only, I loved being a jumper. It was really cool, but the Marine Corps knows how to take the fun out of everything.
100%.
So
skydiving in the Civ Div is way better than jump school in the knot.
Yeah, I've never tried, gone that direction on the civilian jumping, but
well, they got iFly coming in Wilmington. It's about to open.
I know Patrick pretty well. I was gonna I think it's gosh, I forget. Anyway, yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah, Pat, I'm looking. He's gonna come on the show. We're gonna talk about the future of that.
Yeah, he's a super cool dude.
Yeah, really looking forward to that. Hopefully within the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So people can get that experience without actually going to 15.5 and opening a door.
Yeah, it just makes sense to have something like that in the city.
Yeah, I think so too. I guess it's like one of those things that you see and you're like, yeah, why didn't it? Why is
so
this?
I was there when they built the one on Oceanfront, Virginia Beach.
Okay.
And I was like, well, yeah, I mean,
makes sense.
You got who right down the road in Dam Neck.
Yep.
And then you got the guys right here on Little Creek. I'm like, this thing will stay busy all the time. That the vacationers aren't, the rich vacationers that come down here don't take up all the time.
That's right.
But yes, so yeah, got to do some pretty cool stuff. Went to a killer driving course. Went to a live tissue.
The pig training
before it was that hotness. I mean, and
that's great training.
That's the other thing about being in that kind of. I'm sure it's the same in a regular line battalion, but in our 3 shop, there were guys. They put guys in that 3 shop that knew how to do training, that knew what these cats needed.
Well, you guys got priority and budget. And when you take priority and budget and you put somebody that knows what they're doing in front of it.
When we were forced reconnaissance, it was rough. There was definitely budget to get guys through ARS, but not yet.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, you guys got motherfucking K-bars for handles on your doors. I mean, let's be honest, where the money's at.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, it's not a secret either. So
we will never live that down. The K-bars on the doors. I met the kid that called out the CG for that.
Yeah.
He went through the JTAC course when I was up there, and he was like, I stood up. He was like, because he had a kid or one of his buddies killed by a round through the helmet, and he's like, he now granted, I'm getting this information from a dude I hardly knew, but this is the way he told the story.
Yeah.
He's like, these are, we need these ballistic style helmets, and meanwhile, and we don't have them, and meanwhile we've got K-bars on the doors of the headquarters building at MARSOC. He goes, so I stood up during one of these, meet the general, like town hall things, and he goes, hey sir, why did my buddy get killed?
Because he didn't have a Mitch helmet.
When he didn't have the right ballistic helmet, but we've got K-bars on the doors. And the general, to his credit, I don't know who it was at the time, was like, you know what, you're absolutely right. I'm going to look into that for sure. He goes, great point.
And it's not shade, but it's like there's a budget over there that the rest of the Marine Corps doesn't have.
Well, yeah, and the other thing about it is like just straight Marines don't understand the difference between MilCon money and operating money.
Oh, yeah.
Like, just because we got K-bars on the doors that's a different pot of money.
Yeah,
completely.
100%.
It's like,
but it's the perception that it gives your men,
and
or gives the other guys.
And in the Marine Corps, like I'm sure every other service, perception is reality.
Yeah, baby.
Like if you're not out there grinding with your men, which I've been guilty of before, if you're not grinding with your men, you're losing credibility.
Yeah.
If you're not out there, it's hard.
Yeah.
The one thing I will say, being a Marine officer taught me really well how to be a parent, and being a parent taught me really well how to be a good Marine Corps officer. Because
that's a good way of putting it.
It's one and the same. And if you don't want your children doing something, don't emulate it. Don't show them how to do it.
They learn it from you.
Yeah. They learn it by watching you.
It's all learned behavior.
Yeah. So
it's real. That's a fact.
It's absolutely
and that's
real.
why, and we're going to kind of derail here, whatever.
Sure.
But like culture, man, I'm huge about culture. The Marine Corps is a cult. It's a cult.
It really is.
Like you could call it what it is. It's a cult. There's several books that'll tell you it's a cult. Mm-hmm. Not a bad one, I don't think. I think necessarily
not unless you're our enemy.
In the in the way in which it should be is a cult, right? But culture, tradecraft, a unit's culture, right? That's a real thing. And when you have a command that has a good command culture, then that's fucking awesome. But when you have a command that doesn't have that culture, you will watch a unit go from the star player in the line to shuffle down in the pecking order because the culture is lost.
And
right?
that was really difficult to begin MARSOC because we didn't know what that culture.
You didn't have an identity yet.
Yeah, and again, this is Dave Pouleris' again another like
sure
putting out this is Dave Pouleris' perspective. This is how I lived it. This is how I remember it. But it was hard figuring out what the culture was because then you had some guy like I had some kids that would check into our unit as second MSOB as 6 shop, and they wanted to go to a company to be a communicator for a MSOC, right? But they would come in and think it's like, and I hate this term because I heard so much, oh, it's big boy rules now. It's like, brother, you ain't nowhere near a big boy. I'm like, you walk upstairs, like, I'll tell you 2 quick stories. One of them, one of my Marines started, yeah. I'm like, who the fuck you talking to, homie? Don't me. Yeah. Have you lost what it is to? We're Marines.
This ain't the cowboy.
This ain't
corral.
And I'll
here.
tell you another thing. If you go over to JSOC, they don't just big boy rules because they got orders to that. There's a lot of professionalism that goes in line with being part of something like this. You just don't get to like start wearing civilian clothes to work every day and start calling people by their first name just because. You're
here now.
Just because of the sign on the outdoor of the building.
Right.
It's like, don't lose your freaking mind because that's the fastest way that you can get orders out of here.
Yeah, that goes back to the earn it every day thing. It's like you didn't earn it today.
Story about a young Marine that came back from deployment as an intel enabler on an MSOC, and walks in, and this is the way I heard it secondhand from the crusty old recon master sergeant. He goes, I walk into the ABC store and I look, and there's a kid at the cash register with a bottle in his hand, with cami bottoms on and boots, and a second MSOB sweatshirt on. And he goes, I walk right over to him and I whisper in his ear, what the fuck are you doing? And the kid looks back at me and he goes, don't worry about it. I'm MARSOC. He goes, I grabbed that son of a bitch by his collar and I drug him out of there, threw him in my truck, drove him over to the battalion, had him in front of the sergeant major in like no time.
Yeah, because you'll ruin that for everybody, the culture of it for everybody.
Like, dude, I don't know, sometimes that cool guy shit gets out of hand. So there was that side of it. That was the opposing culture that was trying to show its head around guys like Daly, who were professional guys in this thing that were trying to build the culture that it is now.
That it should be. Yeah,
that it should be.
Yeah.
So there was
and
a lot
guys
of,
just thought that was the ticket to come over and be a fucking cowboy or like grow your hair or whatever, right? So
it's like the hair and the beard shit, man. I fought that in Afghanistan.
And look, that shit'll come.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, but it ain't day one when you check in, you're all of a sudden something you're not.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's like you need to worry. Colonel Petronzio used to say it the best. Brilliance in the basics.
Yep.
You need to worry about your basic role in this big machine and not all that other shit.
Perfect your basic role before we start trying to be cool.
Yeah. So we stood up second MSOB. That episodic relationship that I had with First Force Reconnaissance Company with Noah Komnick, then Sean Carano, he took over for Noah, so we started because there's some rule that happened in Iraq where they were like, hey, the equipment needs to be left over there. So imagine this shit show. So we had to share equipment between First Force and Second Force because First Force had left their equipment in Iraq, radios and all kinds of shit. So every time that I deployed over to Iraq to jump on their gear, I had to pack all my equipment up that I had in my radio bay that I was working up with and send it over to the West Coast to First Force so they could work up.
Shit show.
It was nuts, dude.
I get it.
But that's how me and Sean built that relationship. I'm on the phone with him almost constantly, giving him intel about what's going on at the headquarters building and then because those guys on the West Coast, there was nothing over there except the battalion.
Yeah.
I mean, so they were way away from the flagpole. So we were sharing a lot of intel, and Fox Company was the first one out the door. So they were talking about how they were building Alpha Company while we were building Fox. We deployed Fox, and I'll tell you, to this day, it's those guys, heroes. That company was full of heroes and studs. Guy like T. T was he was a Tahitian guy that I don't want to get it wrong, but when I caught up with him, it was on Onslow Bay surfing. He still had like a Tahitian accent, you know, but he was as red hair as you are.
Oh boy!
Strangest look. You think you're Tahitian? He's like, yeah, Tahitian. But his wife looks Tahitian, and his daughters look Tahitian, but T looked like you, like a straight up Irishman. And but dude, that guy could surf. I remember being out in the lineup with him in Onslow, and it's just me and him surfing, and it's a big day, and I'm like, I don't even know how I'm gonna get in. And T looks over at me, he's like, you just shoot it, just shoot. And I'm like, what? And he goes, watch, and he paddles into this monster, and he drops, and I lose visual contact on him, and all I can hear him going, woo, through the barrel, man, and popping out the next side. He's like, see, like that, shoot, just shoot it. I'm like, dude, that was bananas. But he was unassuming, super cool, incredible operator, like one of their go-to guys in their company. He went to work with after Fox Company, he went off to work with some other agency somewhere.
Sure.
And I ran back into him when I got orders to Little Creek, to EWTG Land. Okay. I was walking in the PX one day and I felt a tap on my shoulder, and I turned around and it's T, and I go, T, what the hell? He's like, what's up, man? What are you doing? And I'm like, what the hell are you doing here?
Yeah.
And he was in civilian clothes. He's like, oh, don't worry about that. He's like, just kind of visiting. He's like, how you been doing? I'm like, I'm doing great. How are you? Because he disappeared into that world.
Yeah.
And that's when I saw him. And he got killed in Afghanistan.
Oh.
And it's been kind of several years ago. And I've got a picture on my phone of the paddle out that we did for him up in Emerald Isle, and people came out of the woodwork. People came from across the country to paddle out for him, and they put his wife. It was really cool. It's the first paddle out I've done ever, and so they all gave us flowers, and so we all paddled out on our board. Some guys put their fins on and just swam out, and we got past the breakers, and they put her in a Zodiac, and they paddled her out in the Zode. And then we all like did our thing and then threw our flowers into the boat with her. And he was a huge loss. And when it is a terrible truth that most of the time it's like the best guys get it.
Oh, dude, yeah. I think there's some truth to that, and the other truth is that most of the guys are great.
Yeah.
This is the Marine Corps in general is a microcosm of the greatest American patriots that are here now.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So sometimes, and unfortunately, sometimes it seems like those guys, they're all around us.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody that's been on my show, prior to this is somebody that I look to as a hero or look at as somebody that people should know about, right? And unfortunately in our community, a lot of times that doesn't come until they're gone.
Yeah.
And people don't realize the giants they stand beside until they're gone. And then you realize when you have a funeral procession or a paddle out or you see the monsters come out of the woodwork and you say this was somebody.
Yeah.
And people just don't know. They rub shoulders with these guys every single day. And something that irritates me, I think, a little bit, not to get dramatic, but something that irritates me is we are just like Rome. We give the people games, and they look and they watch, and it's UFC and it's college football, and people don't know the gladiators and the heroes that are right here.
Absolutely. That
they go and they're at the grocery store with these motherfuckers. They don't even know it, right? And so, yes, it's a lot of times the good ones.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of good ones. So the odds of it being a good one in that community, in my opinion,
you're absolutely right. Yeah.
are so much higher than other communities.
Sure.
So,
very true. I think there is a certain type of individual that the Marine Corps invites into its ranks, and that makes
calls
it,
even.
He calls it. Yeah. I thought about this podcast and coming on, and I was like, I don't want to seem braggadocious or trying to get my story out there. And I thought to myself, I'm like, this is a way to record my perspective on those times.
Sure.
It's also a way to give something to my family,
after
that they can listen to and say, oh, sure, you never talked about that. But what it really was, and what kind of settles me, and it is kind of corny, but I will say it because I thought about it. But in 300, where King Leonidas or whatever the dude's name was, the king.
King Leonidas.
Yeah, Leonidas at the end, he goes, hey. He takes one of his lieutenants, the dude with the thing over his eye. He goes, hey, you're not going to fight. You're going to go back and tell everyone about what happened here.
That's it.
And I was like, that's what I need to do here.
That's it.
Is I wasn't the one that, kicked down the door. I was never the one that ate a bullet or that, called an amp. I was never that guy. But I have a chance to be the one that goes back and tells everybody else about those guys.
And it's not just that though, man. Like, and it's hard for me to explain it because, and it's hard to hear it maybe from me. I've been there. I kicked the doors. I shot the people in the faces. I did all of that.
Right.
However, none of that is possible without supporting agencies, and you don't realize that until you're there. You don't realize it. And so, like, when I've had other people come on, Pogues or, guys that have different lines than me.
Sure.
And I say the same thing. It's like, no, but guess what? There are other communicators that are coming up in the ranks right now that maybe could benefit from hearing your line.
Yeah.
Just like the grunts that listen to the grunts on the show. It's like, here's a bunch of things done poorly that you can improve on. Mm-hmm. Here's a bunch of things that we made mistakes in that we paid for in blood. Yeah. don't do these things. It's a big TDG, right? Every one of these shows is a TDG.
Yeah.
So for a comm guy coming up, or for a Mustang coming up in
Yeah.
another MOS, or for a guy that's outside the ground operating forces that wants to get to MSOC or get to MARSOC now, like this for them, and like understand that without the communicators, communication's everything. If I don't have communication on the ground, nothing fucking happens.
Dude, they tried to write communicators out of the teams when they built MARSOC.
Can't.
And I had to go up and sit down with General Halick and Corey Davis, another fantastic communicator from the recon community. And there's a ton of them. I've got them written down. Joe Bell, Alaruso, Jim Edelman, Corey Davis, Joe Granero, who is probably the best Marine communicator of generations, who was a Chief Warrant Officer 5 when he retired, who went to JCU and JSOC and taught at JCU. One of the most brilliant communicators probably the Marine Corps ever seen, who died of cancer. Unfortunately, I was working at MARSOC headquarters with him right before he passed away. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a ton of.
I just think it's lost sometimes. I think that people like the kick the door down, stories and all of that, but the underpinning of all of that being possible is all of the support agencies.
Yeah. And the Marine Corps does that.
Don't get the limelight much.
Dude, some of the other components in SOCOM were like asking for our guys, not for the shooters. They were like, you bring a incredible intelligence capability with your MSOC.
John talks about the intelligence apparatus, both in his book and then when I had him on prior to this, he talked about with reverence the nerds, let's say, and what they were able to do to come up with actionable intelligence and the speed in which they were able to do it. And that is all y'all. That is not something we do.
Dude, and when I was Force Recon in Iraq, the 2 deployments I did with Force Recon, Colonel Petranzio, and then Colonel Montanus inherited this, but Colonel Petranzio, we started building our own target packages.
And that's what John was talking about.
We would do all the intelligence on our own, because we were co-located with a regular infantry battalion. They were like, we can't do this for you.
Right.
So Colonel Petranzio's got it. We're gonna do this.
It will happen.
And it was all vetted. It was all up and up, on the up and up, and it was all up through headquarters, through Blue Diamond, all that stuff. But we did it, and you're absolutely right. That's the magic of the Marine Corps, is the MAGTAF, is bringing everything that you need for combat with you.
That's it.
And then we do it very well.
Yeah, people don't realize how well we do it until you watch Russia invade a country as small as it is and then struggle and have strung out vehicles, and it's like that's high school. What we bring is Olympics, and like you see a vast difference just in that. And in Russia was somebody that was like revered by most American fighting men. Like, well, if we go to war with Russia, and now it's like,
I think
exposed.
I think Rhino and Mattis was like the longest amphibious assault ever, or something like that.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's what it was, because anyway. But yeah, that's the magic of the Marine Corps. Is we bring everything we need with us, and everything.
And the improvise, adapt, and overcome. You guys weren't supposed to be doing this. This is not something you do.
Yeah.
And then it's like, hey, we still need to do it.
When we got to Iraq, they were like, we've got a force reconnaissance company. What do we do with them? Reconnaissance was always like, we're going ahead of the forward line of troops, and we're deep. Force reconnaissance is the deep reconnaissance.
penetration.
And now that we're not having to, now that there is no FLOT, that you walk out of the gate and you're in combat. So what do we do with these guys? And so we had to start developing. That's where we went from doing these motorized raids. We were in Al Qaim, we were working reverse schedule. So all of our guys, except for the guys in Usaba, they were anyway.
You're talking about day and night.
Working reverse schedule, operating at night, operating on actionable intelligence and targets, and going out and doing all this stuff. And we were getting after it and really innovating. And then we went to helo assaults and helo raids. And we started proving, like, hey, we can get in. We can land a force reconnaissance platoon offset from a observation and hike in. We were doing stuff that had been done before, but it really wasn't conceived of. And we were like, yeah, let us do this. We can do this. And, it was super cool, man. And I got the opportunity to Fox Company. The only thing I'll say about Fox Company is I don't feel like we were ready to support a company that was moving so fast. As a headquarters element, we were like, what do you need? I don't know what you need. You tell me what you need. We're all doing this for the first time, and the rule book is kind of like, is it in Tampa? Is it Brad Moses, who lives that I was telling you about? The USASOC sent him to MARSOC and was like, help these guys build what MARSOC should look like.
Yeah, you needed a structure and a foundation.
So it was a lot of learning, and but the one thing I'll say about Fox Company is full of heroes, full of studs. I'll never say a bad thing about them. A horrible situation, like we were talking earlier, that they got.
Talking about Fred's guys.
Yeah, Fred's guys.
Yeah.
Fred is awesome. I always looked up to Fred. I can remember when I first saw him at the battalion, and I didn't even have to meet him. I was like, oh, that's going to be the Fox Company commander. Because you look at Fred,
he carried himself.
He's again just like Riley. He's like walks in right off the poster. You know, he's like, that's a Marine's Marine. You know, and tactically perfect. And I will tell you this, Fred worked. I never saw him away from the battalion.
Tireless.
I mean, he just tireless. That guy sacrificed more for. I'll say history will show that Fred Galvin sacrificed more for MARSOC than, well, I would argue, a lot of people, because
maybe all.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not.
I mean, I don't either. I don't want to say
look,
that.
I'm not here to make any wild claims or anything like that. But I look up to Fred, and I always have. I think the situation, again, I learned a lot about it secondhand afterwards. The only time that I was involved with it was just hearing what was going on while they were deployed.
Yeah.
And then when their equipment flew home, because some of their equipment landed back at the battalion before they did, and NCIS just freaking raided it.
Yeah, you were telling me offline that they treated those guys horribly, and you're talking about sending heroes home. And then again, follow up that with a MARSOC 3 later.
Yeah.
And some of these situations
much later.
are I'm just saying.
Yeah, you're absolutely
right.
It
seems to be a trend of criminal investigation going NCIS, to investigate our guys. It seems like there are some real dicey stipulations and guidelines that maybe they stick to.
Not only did the Marine Corps hate us for being MARSOC, but there were some people in MARSOC that hated us for being MARSOC. And from what I understand, a lot of the guidance that those guys left with was like, just don't screw up out there, and that's fucked up, man. If you're getting guidance from a superior, just don't screw up. All right? We all got that? That's kind of fucked up. But anyway, I read his book. I think it's a great read. I knew everybody in that book pretty much intimately, except for some of the guys over in Afghanistan that they dealt with. And I can tell you everything that he said in that book is 100% accurate from the stuff that I had.
From your experiences.
From my experience. And it should be a lesson, to us.
Should have been.
Yeah. And
because it's happened again now.
Sure.
I mean, this is just my shot across at leadership that may find themselves watching this podcast is like, that ain't the fucking way. So Fox Company happened. They left Afghanistan. I think they went to like Kuwait. Then they finally came home. And then we didn't go back to Afghanistan until Alpha Company went back. And I can't remember how long it was before they allowed Alpha Company to go back in. But then I went with the next company back. So I was with Gulf Company, the third company back in Afghanistan. And whatever happened with Fox, it seemed like when I got to the Siege of Sodef, working for an Army SF colonel. I worked for both Colonel Reeder at the time, who was retired General Reeder, and Colonel Haas, who was he was in the horse. He's got a storied career as well. I worked for both of them because I was there long enough to see one change over command Siege of Sodef with the other, and I sat right down, and they were. It almost felt like, hey, we get it. I tell you what. Let's go at this again and let's get it right. And Alpha Company got it right, man. I mean, they did. The company commander's name escapes me. Sean mentioned him on your podcast with Carano. He was awesome. He was just freaking awesome. He came up to the Siege of Sodef, and I got to meet him in his out brief to the colonel. And it's just like, God, man, I wish I could have worked for that dude in combat. Him and his crew, and they rebuilt the credibility. And then Mike Brooks with Frank Mercer as his ops chief, who was Master Sergeant Mercer at the time.
Then they brought Golf Company back, and Mike Brooks asked me to be their LNO at the Siege of Sodif, which was an incredible Ed Norris, who I think just gave up the regiment. He was regimental commander, the most recent regimental commander, Ed Norris.
Okay.
He was Mike Brooks's XO. Ed wanted me to be their company OPSO. They wanted to bring an OPSO into the company. I was like, hell yeah, man. Because what happened was our TO grew, and I was a captain. We rated a major as the MSOB Battalion Out 6. So I was an alpha again. I was like, freaking, I'll go anywhere. And I wanted to stay in as long as I could. I wanted to stay in SOCOM as long as I could.
Why would you not?
So yeah, I was like, anything you got, I'll do it. And so he was like, I need you to be our LNO at the Siege of Sodif. I was like, roger that, done. And I flew over there with the Advon into Kandahar, got my way up to Bagram, spent 7 great months up in Bagram supporting those guys that did God's work out in Helmand Province before Leatherneck was stood up, when there was only Bastion out there with the Brits.
Yep.
And I will kid you not, this is coming from my perspective at the Siege of Sodif. I could get up in the morning, go grab some coffee at the chow hall, make it into the jock just about the time the sun was rising, and those guys would be out on patrol. And as the sun came up, we could look at our watches and be like, 3, 2, 1, troops in contact.
Yep.
And the light would come on, and it'd be like every morning.
Here
and
we
they would start fighting, and I think they'd break at lunchtime. But Mike Brooks is an incredible. This is again Kamos talking about an infantry guy, but incredible tactician, incredible experiences both in Iraq and then now in Afghanistan while I'm there with them.
Sure.
Ed Norris, Frank Mercer, Ivan Ingram was on that deployment. Sean Disbennett, who I still keep in touch with, who was the SEA senior enlisted advisor, I think, when he retired at MARSOC. He was on that deployment. Just rock stars, man.
Yeah.
Just freaking rock stars. I'll think of some other names, but yeah, they went out there and they just, they were racking up some numbers, man.
Yeah.
They were racking, and trust me, those guys, they wanted to fight. They wanted to fight our guys, and they found out like this is
should have fought somewhere else.
Some Marine MSOC in this town now, buddy.
Yeah.
And we were pulling some pretty big numbers. We were doing such good work that the MU actually got wind of us in there doing, working, and the MU sent a team to come in and try to convince the Siege of Sodif to bring the MU in and support us. And I think we got a couple sections of Harriers to support us out there. Haven't Strut and Fruit Bat were the 2 FACs that came in, and they were dropping ordnance like it was cool, man. The Halo call sign over there for the JTACs and the FACs, they were, everybody was checking into the AO. That was anybody that had ordnance on their aircraft was checking in the AO asking to work with Halo.
Yeah.
Like, does Halo got any work for us?
Because they knew they were going to drop.
They knew. Oh yeah. Those guys were awesome. And you want to talk about 2 solid facts. The funny thing is both Fruit Bat and Strut were both former prior enlisted reconnaissance men.
Imagine that.
Imagine that shit. Which is funny because you see jump wings, they had their gold pilot wings with a dive bubble above it, and you'd be like, those aren't jump.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah, it's like, what the fuck?
What are you into?
Yeah. It's almost one of those things where it's like, hold on, what was your background?
Stolen valor going on here.
But I'll tell you this. And then Fruit Bat he went back to Afghanistan when Leatherneck stood up as a pilot flying Harriers, and he was there. He got the Silver Star for when those insurgents jumped the fence or whatever happened down in Leatherneck.
Got attacked.
And he grabbed a couple guns and started smoking people and got a Silver Star for it, I think.
Same guy, huh?
Same freaking dude. Rob T. McDonald, man.
Fuck yeah.
Dude, let me tell you something.
Shout out.
Rob T. is one of the wildest characters. And hey, I know Rob. I know you're probably still in, and you're probably a squadron fan or something right now, but he's a funny dude, and he's got some stories to tell. I won't tell him right now because some of them may have some of his Marines come and be like, oh, so I heard about this and that. The other. Yeah. But I won't tell any stories about him. But and Strut was the same way. Strut was about the calmest, coolest, like laid back jet pilot type dude.
Well, they were all like that in my experience.
Yeah, the good ones.
Yeah, the good ones. I had Pistol 46, Weasel, and Sugar Bear in the Marja Those are the three that stuck out to me that constantly supported us, and they were always like that. Hey man, checking on right now, pushing in from the IP. What can we do for you today?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, you could just blow this whole fucking tree line up as quickly as possible, whatever it is. Always in school, you're trying to do the 9 line, and you're trying to everything's formatted, which is good. You need all of that. In combat, they're like, where are they at?
Yeah.
Show me. Good. Got it.
Yeah. This is the enemy's position, or we
Poppin'.
went, dude. Yeah. And so fast forward to me going to EWTG Land and being asked to go up and work with the JTAC instructors at TACP school. I think a lot of my flying as a child helped me in that school. 100%. Because it gave me the ability in my brain to see the perspective of the pilot and understand how he was seeing things. And I made it through. So here's how it happened. So, funny story, Garrett Lawton, who was killed on August 4th, Tubes, he was a Hornet Wizzo, and he checks into the battalion, and we go to Fort Pickett to do the culminating exercise for, I believe it was Gulf Company before Gulf Company deployed. It was like their CERTEX or whatever. It was either Gulf or Fox, I can't remember. Garrett had just checked in. He was going to be the next FAC, and he was going to be in Gulf EFG Hotel Company, I guess. He was going to be the FAC for them. And I remember sitting in our BOQ room, and I'm telling him stories about Iraq, and I'm telling him stories about Shabelle, and I'm telling him stories about Frisky and how Frisky shaped Fallujah with just him. He did more cast missions than Fallujah. I'm telling him all these wild stories and how heroic Shabelle's guys were and everything. Little did I know that he was on his way to, being one of those guys in Afghanistan. From what I understand, got a Purple Heart on patrol before he was eventually killed in Afghanistan as a FAC. And it's, you can't write that shit, and those type of things. And that's another, that's the kind of stuff that needs to live on, and, so I get to TACP, I get to EWTG Land, and that was probably one of the lowest points in my career, because I went from coming home from Afghanistan with an MSOC to getting stuck in a cubicle doing simulated Navy training.
Oh, no.
It was miserable. I was working for, and God bless him, but I was working for a Navy commander who had his previous billet was he was the XO of the USS Cole, which was super cool. But I, had no connection whatsoever. I was doing simulated training. I was like, what the fuck is that? It's basically war games on computers for...
Yeah. And after coming out of where you came out of, that's the last thing you want to be doing.
Dude, I took it out on the bottle like you have no idea, man. I was freaking going down a bad road. And then Ralphie from upstairs came down, and we started talking one day, and he was like, I was like, hey, what are you doing this weekend? He's like, I'm going to a buddy of mine's funeral, got killed in Afghanistan. I'm like, who? And he goes, Tubes? And I was like, you know Tubes? He was like, yeah, I knew Tubes really well. And I was like, dude, and I told him that story. And he was like, come to the, and this is one of my regrets, man. And I apologized to him in Arlington. I didn't go to his, he had an Irish wake or something down in Beaufort. And Ralphie went, and he was like, you want to go with me? And I was like, man, at that time I was just like, no, I want to just suffer in my misery.
Yeah.
Here drunk. But he came back, and we kept chit-chatting. I don't know what he saw, but he was like, hey man, he's like, we've got some excess space in the next class. You want to try it? You want to try to be a JTAC? I was like, fuck yeah.
Get me away from this cubicle.
Hell yeah, dude.
Yeah.
I went up there. Intense course, because at that time they were starting to incorporate staff NCOs. It used to be just for pilots.
Yep.
They were starting to incorporate staff NCOs because the demand signal for JTACs was so strong.
Yeah, you had to have them.
Had to have them, and we were cranking them out. But we were cranking out great JTACs. I mean, we really were. Looking back on it now. So I went through a course. I graduated. I started getting controls. I'd quote unquote support them when they would come down here to Lejeune on their live fires, and I would get extra controls in, keep my currency up, and they're like, hey man, you want to try to be an instructor? We could use you. And I was like, hell yeah, I got my instructor qual, and it was the coolest thing in the world. And
pick you up out of your stupor.
What it did is it gave me a purpose. It made me feel like I still had purpose to the fight. Like that was my way of contributing to the fight, was doing this, because I was there was no joke. It was like, listen, these guys that are in this class are like, hey, sir, I'm leaving here and catching up with my company.
I need to know
in
right
Afghanistan.
now all the sauce.
Yeah, and we're getting direct feedback from the guys that we just trained from in Afghanistan. They're like, oh yeah, all that 9-line shit is really cool and all. He's like, it's all keyhole cast over here. It's like we're doing, and keyhole cast was great. It was more expedient.
Sure.
And again, I'm going to mess some of this stuff up because it's been a long time since I've controlled any aircraft or done any of it. But we were breaking it now bare bone style, but we were also evolving. Our division lead, Lieutenant Colonel, I forget his last name, but his call sign was Gecko. He came in and he was a coyote out at CATS.
Okay.
And he turned our tactics up and broke the fucking knob off, dude. We went from doing, you could graduate the most complex attack that graduate your culminating event or your test at the end of which it was a SEAD, combined sequential attack, rotors and fixed wing with SEAD, and if we were cool, it would be non-continuous, I think it was called, or something, where you could shut it down and not have to worry about it, or you could do continuous, where you had like a 1-minute break between fire missions that you had to get all those bombs
in and out. Yeah.
And so that was the culminating event, but then we started doing really complex, like we didn't even touch type 1. It was all type 2. And we were doing type 2 stuff. It got to the point, and it was pushing the instructors.
If you can just break it down for the layman, like, so a type 1 control is going to be certain person has control or authorization of a release of ordnance, and then a type 2 would be somebody else taking. Like, I don't know the difference and I don't know if it's changed much now, but I know that when I was calling for close air support, I had a JFO. So one of my guys was a JFO, but he could not take over control from that aircraft the way a JTAC could.
You were doing it from the CP.
Well, no, on patrol.
Or on patrol,
whatever.
Have
him with me, yeah. But he didn't have the same authorization as a JTAC would have.
Correct.
Which had to maybe at the time be a lieutenant or above or an officer or something.
And we were training that because not only did we step up the tactics and get away from like, who's going to do a type, because type 1 control, now I'm going to get this wrong and I don't have any social media, so you can't, but don't call me and chew me out. but in basic, type 1 control is I can authorize release of the ordnance because I can see the trajectory of the aircraft and the attack angle it's on, and basically I know it's within its release parameters and everything's safe and it's in way to the target. Type 2 control, you don't have visual acquisition of the aircraft. It's probably up in the overhead somewhere, and it's releasing its ordnance based on some sort of designation that you've given it, but I forget how it is. Like, you have to have eyes on the target, and they have to have some sort of eyes on the target, and like
so that's the way I understood it was
from the sensor. Yeah,
type 1, or the way I understood it was type 1 is the aircraft assuming authorization for release, and type 2 was like the guy on the ground giving the authorization or something along those lines. All I know is there was times when I did not have a JTAC, so I did not have authorization on the ground, and because of that, rockets didn't come, or Hellfires didn't come, or bombs didn't come. Yeah, and
because you're signing your
name. Times that happens was the times I lost Marines because I did not have a JTAC. I lost people that I maybe otherwise didn't have to lose. Yeah,
that's rough. That's rough. I can't speak.
No, and I'm not. It's not shade.
I need to pull the JCAS out, the current JCAS out, and read it. But the bottom line is that we were ramping up the capability to match what the guys were actually doing in combat. This wasn't a finishing school for some pilot any longer to come and get his B billet as a FAC under his belt, so he has to come through the school that he breezes through because he's been releasing dummy bombs off his thing and training. This was like, oh no, like because we were getting Navy guys through to do their FAC stuff, but it was most of the class was like, these guys are going to combat. They'll be in combat shortly after they graduate from the school. So we need the latest and greatest, and we need to push them because we know the harder we make it for them here in this class to graduate, the easier it's going to be for them. And we're trying, and then we developed the JFO program while I was there. And so Master Sergeant German, who was an incredible dude and went on to work with some tier 1 orgs after he retired, he was basically in charge of standing up the JFO program, and he did. And so now we were having sergeants come through the JFO course. Yeah. So we were trying to incorporate them with the JTACs and the facts.
No, that was great. I fully love that.
Yeah.
The other gives part, a whole lot more command of those assets. Not all of the command, but it helps.
But it was, and the cool part about it is the culture of the ground smashed into the culture of the air wing and the good parts of the air wing. And one way I'll relate it to you is like, I would always show up prior to classes, like 10 minutes prior, and I'd always give all the other instructors who were all pilots or wizzos or had been in the cockpit, they'd all show up like right on time. And I'd be like, haven't you ever heard about being, early? Yeah, if you're on time, you're late. They're like, not in the air wing. You give me a TOT, I arrive right on that TOT.
Yep, that's when I'm here.
I'm like, that's the cultural difference between the air wing and I'm like, it's just but it was great because you get that and all the pilots. Let me tell you something. Another group of individuals that were strict professionals that I learned a ton from, but that brought their A game every day to guys that were going to be on the ground fighting. Those guys.
Oh no, the pilots are for real.
They're legit, man. And every assault, I don't give a shit. Assault support all the way up to like some dude in the back of a Hornet or in a Hornet, flying a Hornet. All of them were great, and they all did what they had to do, man. Because at that time, everybody knew it's going straight to combat. None of these guys are doing a Westpac.
Yeah. This is all real right now.
And we're trying to crank as many of them as we could. Legitimately, though.
Yeah,
that was ones. 4 weeks. I think each class was 4 weeks. That was 4 weeks of. That was the first time I think since TBS probably that I had to make flashcards of like ordnance capabilities and all
trying to get it memorized and
Dude, it was bananas. It was really
now moving forward from there. What I know there's some more left, but when you leave that area, whatever command that was, would you say?
EWTG land.
Yeah, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't remember.
Yeah, that's fine.
When you leave there, where do you
go? Pentagon.
Pentagon. Yeah. Now talk to me about that. Why are you at the Pentagon?
Just because I had been
like a rate for an officer.
Oh yeah. Okay. Mostly officers at
commo officer.
I was a program analyst for all the C4 and intelligence programs in the Marine Corps, and I reported to a equivalent of a 1-star. So I reported to a colonel, but he worked for a 1-star equivalent SES, and then we worked for a 2-star who was the deputy of programs and resources who worked for a 3-star. Funny is the 3-star that I worked for, I forget his name, was the commander of the transportation det that I was with in Camp Fox, Kuwait, who took all the trucks up on the initial push.
Okay.
He now has advanced to be a 3-star, and I'm co-located with him, working for him in the Pentagon. And it was super cool. It was way out of my wheelhouse. Like I walk in, and
that's why I was asking. Like, what is?
There's dudes doing advanced mathematics, and they all have PhDs, and I'm like, what the fuck am I doing?
How'd I get here?
I'm like, what do I do? I'm like, there's no way. I'm a history major, barely, from VMI. And, yeah, it was 2 years of, like, peering behind the curtain of what really, the way Washington works. Yeah. I kid you not, there's a class that I didn't take, but they make everybody take when they get to the Pentagon. It's called How Washington Works.
Yeah,
and everybody has to, that on top of, there's a book about how to just survive navigating the Pentagon. And it was a strange 2 years, but I'm glad I got to see it. But when I will say this, it's not all about the money. It is all about the money.
Yeah, I know that.
You know what I'm saying? And
I'm in Reston. I work for a company outside of Reston, Contractor Circle right there.
Yeah.
And we train Marines, but Conflict Kinetics, I don't know if you've heard of it. So I work for them, and they're right outside the Beltway up there, and there's a lot of politics and a lot of money levers, and that's what means something. Look, is the money levers.
And I never went to Capitol Hill about anything, but I think one of my claims to fame, this was during the Obama years, so when we got put into sequestration. So it was when you remember we rose to 202 or something like that, 202,000, and then Obama cut us back to, or Obama cut the budget, and put us in sequestration. So the Marine Corps was like,
What's 175 or 185?
What's the most
something?
expensive thing in any organization is the people.
Yeah.
And that's when battalions were getting
Yeah.
cut. And so one of the times they were like, hey, Pouleris, you go find money. What do we need to cut in programs? And I don't know if you ever heard of J-Stars. It was an intel program, and it was something that I was like,
That.
I was like, because I did my research, and we had one J-Stars capable van. J-Stars was a program where it's a giant Air Force jet that flies over the battlefield and gets a digital picture of the battleground, and pushes it back to a giant division level or higher CP. I'm probably getting this all wrong, but in general, that's kind of what the program was. We had one vehicle, I think, at our intel battalion on the West Coast and East Coast that could even do this capability, and they only trained on that thing like one time a year if they could frag
How
the
much
jet.
did it cost?
$16 million across the fit up. I mean, $16 million, which, by the way, when I recommended in a paper to cancel this program, which eventually did get canceled, I think. I don't know if they ever brought it back. They were like, well, it's only $16 million. I go, what?
Only?
I go, only $16 million?
Find more money.
I was like, this is bananas. I'm like, it's $16 million. So, anyway, long story short, I almost lost my mind at the Pentagon because it was a frog in the boiling pot going, what am I? It feels like it's getting a little hot in here.
And was that your last duty station or no?
No.
What was next?
So, survived Pentagon, requested early orders to Fort Story, back to Virginia Beach, to work for Marine Corps Security Cooperation Group.
Okay.
Which, next to a SOF type of unit, this is kind of one of the SOFy type things that the Marine Corps has, which probably not a lot of people know about.
I've never heard of it.
Where you get these foreign area officers, FAOs, that are either there's some enlisted guys that I think can get it, but mostly officers that get it, where they actually specialize and go to school for certain areas like Thailand or the Pacific, or
Sure.
Some of the guys were South American, a lot of Spanish speakers in that debt. Some of the guys were going over to Georgia and Europe and then we had guys that were going to the Middle East.
Sure.
So each one was regionally aligned to a different COCOM, and we had like a 10, or I don't even think it was that big. I think it was like a 6-8 man debt. That mostly officers, captains, and I think it was led by a lieutenant colonel, that would go and do security cooperation in these regional areas for the Marine Corps, which security cooperation is kind of like a Green Beret, and there's probably Green Berets that are being like, bullshit, that's not, but it's kind of our answer to that kind of thing.
Okay.
We develop a security cooperation plan for that country. Like, this is how you can, the equipment you need, the training you need to do, the relationships you need to have, and the tactics you need to develop to keep yourself safe. Now, security assistance, which is something that the command did also, but there was in the security assistance branch, that was all civilians, because they were the ones that sold military equipment to foreign countries.
Yeah.
So we would go in and do the one-on-one training, and those guys would sell the equipment, right? Which super cool. I never even knew. Again, I never knew we had programs and resources in the Pentagon. Got stationed there for 2 years. Never knew we had a security cooperation group. Just knew it was in Fort Story. I was geo-batching at the Pentagon at that time, so I was like, I'll get orders back to back down to where I live, and I spent 3 years there. It was great. It was on Fort Story, which is the first landing state park, where John Smith and landed before he went up to Jamestown and founded Jamestown. It's the jewel of the DoD. If anybody out there ever can get orders to Fort Story, it's a beautiful little piece of heaven at the north end of Virginia Beach. Right where the Chesapeake and the James River dump into the Atlantic. Right there is, and just up from it is Little Creek, is Fort Story, and it was great, man. It was a really cool time. And didn't do really anything sexy there. I think the sexiest stuff that I did was we were able to do some training with a Navy SAR bird that was flying in and out, and I of course I was a JTAC instructor prior. I was way out of my I wasn't qualified, but I was like, hey, do you mind if I get some of my Marines out here to kind of like talk to you in a medevac type format, to do like a medevac 9-line for you as you're coming in and doing this training on Fort Story? And the SAR pilots were like, So what do you want us to do? And just answer the radio calls.
Yeah.
Just be like, Roger, inbound, we're visual. Or,
Did they do it?
Yeah, they did it.
Oh,
and
cool.
so I got a group of Marines to sit there and talk to a helicopter, which 9 out of 10 times is not the sexiest thing you can do in the world. But if you're stuck, busting rust on whatever,
Beats not doing it.
And it's cool. You could talk to a pilot,
Yeah.
So that's the kind of the coolest thing I did there. But it was a really cool time. I tried to retire early out of there because they were offering early retirements.
Yeah.
And so I submitted my paperwork, and I was like, 16 years, I'm done. And my CO there, God, I can't remember his name. I'll think about it, but he rejected it. He goes, listen, man, he goes, I know what you're doing, and I get it. He goes, I think I'd been passed for promotion the first time. And so
You're
I was
a
like,
captain? Or
I was a major.
You're a major.
Yeah, I'm a
okay.
major by then. I got promoted to major. Shit, I can't remember. I think it was before I went up to the Pentagon.
Okay.
But I was pretty much done. I got thyroid cancer at that time.
No.
I was starting to have a lot of wild shit going on.
Yeah.
There was a lot of guys that I worked with that got cancer.
A lot of Marines get cancer
Dude,
from places that we were sent.
Not only cancer, but I know of guys that, MARSOC guys, like not out of shape at all. Not like physically at the top of their game, stroking out.
Yeah.
Having heart attacks. And it's weird, man. Yeah. This is before that jab and all the COVID shit.
No, I know.
It's just like weird shit.
No,
a lot of us got
There's
cancer.
a lot of places in Iraq that, unbeknownst to Marines that landed there or different elements that landed there were chemical and nuclear and biological weapons drained into the sand.
Yeah.
And then when you put a base up, like one of my good friends, one of my buddies from Marja, passing away a couple of years after we got back, but it turned out he was in Iraq on a certain base that had certain things spilled into the sand.
Yeah.
Like the Hunter 7 Foundation's now exposing a bunch of this stuff. Not that we did anything wrong, but if you didn't know,
yeah,
and now you got to deal with that. But it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I was dealing with that. The drinking was coming to a head, all that kind of stuff, and cancer.
So what did the colonel tell you?
So he said, look, he goes, I get it. He goes, but you're a good guy. He goes, this early retirement is not for guys like you. He goes, they're for guys that need to kind of just
need to get out of the way.
He goes, I know you were passed for promotion, and let's look into that. He goes, do you have a career counseling scheduled? I was like, yes, sir. He was like, let's wait till the career counseling's over, and then come back at me with this. Mm-hmm. And he goes, and let's talk about it. And so I had my career counselor, and my career counselor was like, dude, he goes, there's no smoking gun here. He goes, the only thing I can tell you is you never had command. Again, I never followed that
right
for promotion, and it came back to bite me.
It will.
Especially when they were drawing down the force.
Yep.
We don't need this many officers anymore.
Yep.
You're very expensive for us to maintain. So he goes, there's no smoking gun. All I can tell you is just keep doing what you're doing. Try to do whatever you can to be more marketable. And we'll see you the next time come up for promotion. And so I went back to the boss, and I was like, yeah, this is what he said. He was like, and so he basically convinced me to stay in.
Yeah.
And at that time, I was up for orders, and they were like, yeah, we'll send you back to MARSOC.
Oh, fuck yeah.
And I was like, sweet. I was like, I have no delusions of grandeur.
Going home.
It was, dude. So there was always like, I will get better when I get back there. Mm-hmm. Like I just need to get back in the fold. And then all this drinking and all this fucking banging my head against the wall and feeling like I'm disconnected and I'm not doing cool shit anymore, all that will go away. Mm-hmm. Which kudos to Sean for staying so connected that he was actually able to be awarded, the MOS and stay at MARSOC as a badge raider. Yeah. Kudos to him. And it's funny when I finally got back there and he walks into the conference room the first time I look at him, I look at his chest, I go, what the fuck? I go,
how the fuck did you do this?
As the meeting's going on, I'm like, under my breath, I'm like, how in the hell did you? He's like, well, we'll talk after.
Yeah.
But so I was like, if I could just get back to MARSOC. And I had no delusions of grandeur. I'm not going out on any.
Sure.
I'm not going to get in there and be like, hey, I went to Afghanistan once with the company. Like, where do you want me? And it's like, nope, you're going to the G6. I met Ryan Evans Mongo there, who was a lifesaver because he was one of those guys. He was a rock star communicator, huge bodybuilder looking dude, brilliant communicator, and just a solid integrity. He had been at JSOC and JCU. He'd done all that stuff, all the really cool stuff that a communicator can do. he was the guy, if the general was ever going anywhere and needed his SIPR travel kit or whatever, Ryan would go up and show him how to use it. Or Ryan would get the phone call in the middle of the night, shit ain't working, talk him through it. And I think Ryan's still working for MARSOC now he retired and put him through the Honor Foundation. But yeah, so I got orders back to MARSOC and I was like, this is cool. At least I can finish it out at MARSOC.
Is that where you finished?
That's where I retired out of. Yeah. And in my retirement, all I did was what I'm doing today is like, I just want everybody here to know that you had some part of this career that I've had, and I made it to the end. I'm crossing the finish line. I want to say thank you. Yeah. And then I told them at my retirement, because we did it at MARSOC headquarters. And I don't know if you've been in headquarters, you know how they have all the guys, they have it out front on the granite of all the guys that have been killed. And then they have all the pictures up in the foyer. I don't know if they still do or not, but
I don't know that I was in that exact spot. I went to a retirement this year over there for a sergeant major. So I'm not sure. Yeah. It's probably the same. I probably didn't make it into that area.
It was the auditorium inside the lobby. Anyway, so I said, listen, I was like, nobody's going to remember anything I say today. So I'm not here to like give you some brilliant speech. Mm-hmm. I'm like, what I want you to do, if you want to make this right for me, or like give me some sort of retirement gift, you go out there and you read all those citations of all those guys that got killed. Mm-hmm. I was like, you read that. And then you walk away understanding a little bit of what this whole machine looks like.
That's right.
And it is. The whole thing, it was an honor for me to be part of that, very small part. But it's something that I cherish. I got my 2 paddles, which I probably, being self-deprecating, didn't rate, but I was given them, and they were wrapped by Marines that I knew, and I had one of the real operators said one time, like, everything TMO packs everything in the house except for my guns and my paddles. Those go with me. Yeah. They never leave my side. They never touch the ground, and I carry them everywhere I go.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so I'm trying to hold up the legacy of what's hanging on my wall back home. So I get back to MARSOC, I check in the G6, and I thought it was going to be this great homecoming where I'm walking in and seeing guys be like, hey, what's up, man? You know what's going on? The whole place had changed.
Nobody.
No, nobody. I had never been to MARSOC headquarters. Like, I check in, and I'm like, wow, this is pretty. There's K-bars on the doors. Holy shit, the kid wasn't fucking with me. Yeah. I'm like, it's literally here. But I had a good time. I was involved with some cool, cool. I had insight on some cool stuff that was going on, and some cool ops that were going on, and some cool equipment development, and so fast forward from when I checked in, where we're doing like, this is me, over, Roger, over, doing that over a HF radio or the old UXC7 fax machine, with the little like carbon or paper that you had to feed into it. I go from that at the beginning of my career to guys are jumping out of doing free fall jumps out of the aircraft and getting under canopy and flipping down their freaking iPhone thing or whatever and navigating or whatever off this phone that's attached to their kit. I'm like, holy shit!
Things change quickly in 20 years.
Enough money and enough time, and you can get really cool really fast. You know what I'm saying?
Figure it the fuck out. Yeah.
The vehicle, everything just, and it had professionalized. It wasn't where it needed to be, where it's probably at now, but it was definitely professionalizing under the tutelage of dudes like Daly and dudes like Jeff Wilson and dudes like Ed Walsh and Ryan Evans and all the guys from Det 1, Todd Kirby, who was in my first THF cohort, who's a stud. He was in Det 1. Corey Davis, who's still, as far as I know, at the schoolhouse. Those guys, you got to give it to them, man. They're still carrying the guide on, and they're like, look, my DNA is all over this place. Yeah. That's probably the awkward way of putting it, but we will do this right. Yeah. There's guys that are there that are like, this is going to be right.
It's their legacy.
Because my last breath on this earth is knowing that this thing is on the way to being
where it's supposed to be. Yeah.
Colonel Petronzio said at our first O call or something, as MARSOC with General Halick, Colonel Petronzio said, he goes, "It's my goal that MARSOC is basically running SOCOM at the end of this thing. Like we're here to and what he was saying by that was not like we're going to take over this place. It was we're here to be the best. We're the best at everything. Unfortunately, I put on that little read ahead of yours that I was on a group by General Dunford at the time, who was the ACMAC when I was at the Pentagon. He put together this Council of Colonels that literally the mission statement for the Council of Colonels was figure out the jackassery that's happening in the Marine Corps. By jackassery, that was at the time where you had the peeing on the corpses, you had the SS flags. There was a lot of stuff going on in the Marine Corps that was
regular infantry too.
Yeah, but here's the thing. We lead the DOD in everything. We're the best at everything. We're also the best at suicides. We're the best at marriage failures. Yeah. We're the best at DUIs. We're the best at motorcycle accidents. It's just and Dunford was done. So he put together this Council of Colonels, and I was tasked. And so the colonels got a bunch of majors to do all the research for them while they sat around the conference table and,
king of the castle,
pontificated about what it takes, right? But I was tagged to go figure out the suicide thing, and it was mind blowing. It was absolutely mind blowing. Like,
purpose.
Yeah. Well, look, I talked. There's one guy. There's a Navy medical officer who sits in Quantico, and his job is, as a medical officer, is to be like, at that time, the guy that tracks all the suicides and stuff in the Marine Corps. And I was like, what is is there a pattern? He goes, no pattern. He goes, the only thing that we've ever been able to determine about people who had tried to kill themselves and didn't succeed, and the ones that we can gather from the people they knew and everything like that did succeed, there's only one common characteristic in any of them. It's not race, it's not gender, it's not anything like where you come from, none of that. It's if you have a belief in a higher power. People that didn't have a belief in something bigger than them and probably lost the biggest thing in their life, which is the Marine Corps, that let them down, they're the ones that we've only been able to find a trend that typically try to do that. And I was like, whoa, that's a big. And so I was like, well, are there any solutions? And he pulls out his drawer and he pulls a gun lock, just a regular little pistol gun lock with the cable, like a cable lock, like you had boot camp that you locked your rifle to your rack. There's a little one for a pistol, and he throws it over there, and he goes, there it is right there. I go, what? He goes, that right there is like, I don't know what it costs. He said it was like $1.70 or something like that. He goes, and that could help.
The time.
It gives a guy.
The time, the delay.
It gives them enough time to think.
Here's the problem.
If they have to put that key in that lock, that's enough time for them to go, should I fucking do this?
Yep. Yeah. I think, dude, I'm nobody. Who am I? But I talk to a lot of people. I read a lot on the subject, and I think that alcohol is killing our community. I think that guys get fucked up, and they don't have that pause for that key. And even if they do have that pause for that key, they're so blacked out right now that they're in their own devices in their brain, and they're not rational.
Alcohol will it does.
If it's not the main contributor to veteran suicide, I got to say that it is the second or third main contributor.
I'm sure it's up there. It definitely changes your. In my deepest times, I could feel if I would ever dry myself out, which being on deployment, you dry out. Yep. That's one of the things that they would tell us when we were translanding from the States over to Europe. They were like, the first couple weeks,
gonna suck.
Look out for guys getting in fights and just being assholes because they're all drying out.
Yep.
And by the time we get over there, because it takes 2 weeks to get over there, by the time we get over there, everybody will be good. They'll be good just enough time for us to hit our first protocol, and then they fucking drink themselves into a stupor, which they were right. And I was the officer on watch for the first night in Rota, and had to pick drunk Marines up off the golf course. But it is when you soak your brain in that kind of toxin, your brain starts changing.
Yep.
And I could tell the difference in my thought patterns and the things that were important, just the way obviously the way you feel. But when you soak your brain in alcohol for an extended period of time, that brain will start. You're pickling yourself.
You're pickling yourself.
But anyway,
I had Gunnies used to tell us that shit when we came home from Marja. Gunny would say, "This shit will go away. You got to pickle yourself a bit more."
mm-hmm.
And it's like that. The worst fucking advice that I know now is the worst fucking advice, but
yeah, look,
but it was advice. I mean, here's the problem: we come from a branch. We come from the Marine Corps, and the whole mantra is "Raw born in a bar," and we drink and we fight and we fuck, and that's what we do, right? And that's you know, you live that, you know. And we have guys living that all the time, but nobody says, "Hey, you know, is that a good idea? Is that healthy?
Yeah.
Is that making me a better warfighter? Is that making me a better operator, a husband, a father?" And you start asking those questions, like, no, it's actually makes you worse at all of that.
Yeah, yeah.
It makes you worse literally at all of that.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't see it.
And you don't
Everybody
see,
else is the one that sees it.
Yeah, you don't see it. And your friends that are beside you don't see it.
Yeah.
But everybody outside of that bubble does.
Yeah, it's tough, man.
I went through it, man. It's just no shade, but that's a process, man. And if we don't tackle that at like an institutional level, it'll just always be the fucking way.
Yeah.
It'll always be the way. I was just drinking. Oh, we're born in the bar. Rah, 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 rah. We get fucked up on the birthday every year. Rah, 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 rah.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the rest of the year, that shit's killing our people.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I think society now is taking a different approach. It seems like it's taking a different approach to just individual health and welfare at a societal level. It's if you plug into the right things, like if you listen to the podcasts that promote sleep and promote, you know, moderation in your consumption of shit that's bad for you, whether that be food or alcohol, whatever.
Sugar, alcohol, doesn't matter.
Sugar, alcohol, anything. So I think there's a groundswell of that's moving toward a better direction.
Health and holistic fitness.
But
yeah.
But you know, the Marine Corps also doesn't do itself any favors, and I'm not going to get on any type of soapbox about it because I was a key offender. Yeah, I think we all were. Yeah, I mean, yeah. But
it's key offenders that went through the grips of that though and came out the other side and said, "Guys, you'll be better. You'll be better without this." If we don't start saying that, it's just a perpetual cycle.
Yeah, that's yeah. I definitely won't argue it. That's for sure.
All right. So in the interest of time, I want to move forward. We're coming in on 4 hours, so we're going to two-part this up probably.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. I love it, but I do want to touch on the Honor Foundation.
Yes.
I touched on it with Sean.
Yeah.
On his way in, I love it. Yeah. I buy into it.
Yeah.
I wish it was available to far more than Tier 1 operators.
And the Honor Foundation feels the same way.
Because they need to be.
Yep.
It needs to be out there for, you know, maybe not everybody, but not just Tier 1 operators.
Yeah,
you know,
look,
there's guys that have been through the ringer and that would absolutely benefit from this organization that just can't be a part of it right now.
Matt Stevens, the CEO, former Dev Group guy, and you know, he's a super great dude. I kid with him. I call him Skipper all the time every time I see him, because just to poke fun. You know,
yeah.
I can't really fuck with him as a SEAL because he was in top tier. You know, so hey Skipper, what's you know? Sure. But he believes in the same thing. I think there were initiatives when I was with him to try to bring our secret sauce, not all of it, but a lot of the key components to the broader force. Just how do you do that at scale? I get it. I understand why not. Here's my perspective about the Marine Corps. Look, the Marine Corps, and this is the one like horseshoe haircut, like barrel-chested Marine thing that I will say. The Marine Corps' job is twofold: make Marines and win our nation's battles. Period. Mm-hmm. Stop. End of story. And it shouldn't be any different. This is my opinion. A lot of people will rub up against this pretty hard. It doesn't matter what you do when you leave the Corps. It doesn't. The Corps should not be focused on anything other than those two things: making Marines and winning our nation's battles, because that's enough. Mm-hmm. You know, that's enough. And you want a force that's only focused on those two things, because at the end of the day, and we're going to have to do it again, just like all those salty old staff sergeants and when I was coming up saying, the next one's right around the corner, motherfucker. Be prepared. Don't take this lightly, because it's coming. Yeah. Well, it's coming again. And you're not going to want a softer, gentler Marine Corps that's worried about what happens when the guys get out of it. Now I will tell you, every commandant, I believe, sits at his desk and goes, what can I do with my excess resources to help them when they're leaving? I know I'm not doing them a good service, but I will tell you this, that's priority number 3 to making Marines and winning battles.
wars. Yep.
And that's just it. And I'm sorry.
No, and I'm not even disagreeing. I just love what the Honor Foundation does. I love it so much that I wish everybody could benefit from it, regardless of where you come from. But let's talk about, what does the Honor Foundation do?
Yeah.
How did you come into that position?
Yeah.
And just give me a basic plug of that for guys that it is available
for
to.
sure. Real quick. So I'm getting ready to retire. Ryan Evans, he was friends with Andy. God, I forget Andy's name. He commanded 1st Battalion. Andy. Anyway, and Andy, the West Coast Raiders were able to go through the Honor Foundation because they had stood up the location in San Diego to support the SEALs.
Check.
Right? And they were like, oh, well, we got these Marine Raiders over here, and they can go through it too. And so San Diego, like, Marine Raiders were going through the Honor Foundation before we even had a campus on the East Coast. Mm-hmm. So Andy talks to, so the Marine Raider Foundation gave money to the Honor Foundation and was like, put one on the East Coast. Here's the money. Make it happen. And so Andy tells Ryan Evans, who was my comm chief in the G6, and Ryan goes, have you heard of the Honor Foundation? They've got a campus in Virginia Beach that helped the SEALs in Virginia Beach. See if you can get into that before you retire. And oh, by the way, they're looking to build a campus here. You should try to apply. And I go, I'm not a badge operator. He's like, fucking just do it, man. And so I did. I went on the trek with the Virginia Beach crew. They actually did their corporate engagement trek, they call it. They did that in Raleigh, and I was able to join them. Will DeWild was the VP of operations. He'd been at Dev Group for like 16 years. I'll tell you offline, but he did stuff at Dev Group that I was like, you guys got that there? And he's like, oh yeah. And he'd been there since like the early 90s or something. He'd been there forever. Hell, we've got a guy, a Marine Raider, JTAC, or I don't know if I'm sure he got it badged, but a guy I know that he got orders to Dev Group as a JTAC and he never came home. He just stayed there for like 13 years until he retired. It's great. But anyway, so where was it? So I joined the Virginia Beach crew and Will on the trek in Raleigh. I was like, this is awesome. And Will was like, hey, I heard you applied, and I started networking with him. And long story short, I get hired as the first director doing what Sean does now. I stood up the campus. We were in the Surf City Community College, Cape Fear Community College campus in Surf City, the little building there. Yeah. We started there. Now they've spread. We built all these corporate contacts down in Wilmington because that was the corporate, or the closest corporate hub that we had. Encino, Josh Glover, who just recently left Encino as the chief revenue officer for Encino. He was a Marine Raider. Actually, he got medically retired because he got shot up pretty bad, leading. I think he was leading NEMSOC as a major, and retired. Went down and started working at Live Oak Bank. Got his degree from the business school at Duke or UNC Chapel Hill one, and then did so well at Live Oak Bank in Wilmington that they spun off Encino, and they're like, go start this up with them. Turns out, like, when they first went public, it was like valued at $50 billion. You probably don't even know this exists down there. $50 billion or something company that's smack dab in the middle of Mayfair in Wilmington. That's a basic. It's an online banking online support. Something, I don't know. It's geeky stuff, but it helps banks on, as an app online for them. Yeah. And Josh was at the top of this organization, and we just kept. I met with him first, and that's when Encino was just getting its feet underneath them, and now they hold all their campus classes in Encino down in Wilmington, and so. Thank you, Josh, for everything you've done. He's still doing great stuff for veterans, and specifically for Marines and Marine Raiders. He's moved on to another company and I'm sure he's doing great there. And so for 3 years, I think it was. I just kept on building cohorts, 2 a year, and then handed it over to a gentleman who was a Marine Raider. He stayed a little bit of time, then moved on to something else, and then Sean took over, and it's doing great. Look, I was being asked when I first stood up to, like, hey, get back on the compound and just walk around to the battalions and advertise and stuff. I was like, see, this is the difference between the SEALs and MARSOC is I don't get back on the compound. Like,
That's right.
Like if you're a former SEAL, you could probably walk down to Coronado, you know somebody, you can get on there and walk around and show people, you don't do that in MARSOC.
No.
Like once they take your badge, you
don't come on anymore.
Persona non grata anymore until you get another badge that they issue you.
Yep.
So I go, and number two, I don't do that. Marines don't do that. We don't pimp, go around and like, I'm not going to be the Liberty
Puts a bad taste.
tax guy on the corner, like flipping a sign. I was like, the most I'll do is put up some billboards around here and do some just regular, flat, gumshoe type work, networking with the guys. And so my first cohort, I had like 13 guys, and now they're fighting to fit 40 in each cohort.
Yeah. No, that's great though.
Because I told them, I was like, this is what we do, is you find a good piece of gear, and by the time the sun goes down that evening, if an operator at MARSOC believes in that cool piece of gear, everybody will know about it by the time the sun goes down, because that Lance Corporal Underground is strong.
Oh yeah,
especially when there's good stuff out there, and people will spread word. And it took a little while, but now, especially with the other battalion over here, and their numbers being so strong, Sean's got his work cut out for him. He's putting cohorts of 40 out, and it's great, and it's quality.
Yeah, they're doing work.
It's quality stuff. Look, it's a formula that I don't know how I know how it was created, but it is like, wow. It's like with Ron Holmes, the Riker grip, Riker USA, and he developed that Riker grip based on a problem he was having, bringing his long gun up and acquiring a target because of the shoulder problems he had. It's one of those things you look at, you're like, oh, absolutely. Why didn't I think of that?
Yeah.
But it's a 3-stage approach. First stage, that first 3 months, or that first phase goes through just the individual. Then you move on to the hard skills like building a resume and building LinkedIn and networking and telling your story and stuff like that. And then you go into the corporate engagement at the end, and it's really like a work up to deployment.
Yeah.
It's like ITB or whatever we used to call it. You do your individual training first, then you come together and you do your team training, and then you do a certification exercise at the end, and then let's go on deployment and kill some bad guys.
Yeah, but those guys are really crushing it after this.
What?
That's what I'm saying. It's working. It's proven.
It is. It absolutely is. And the guys love. I mean, they're like, they couldn't be any happy. I mean, across the board, every testimonial from AFSOC guy, USASOC guy, SEAL, MARSOC guy, wherever, they just love it. They freaking love it. And it's the proof's in the pudding. And and they operate off donated dollars. So if you want to donate to a really good organization, what I used to tell people that I wanted to donate, I was like, sometimes you send your money away to like Wounded Warrior or whatever, which all do great things. I'm not downplaying any of them.
Some do great things.
Sure. But once you send that money away, you're just on goodwill that it's getting to the right place.
Yeah.
I was like, you give me money, and I'll have you in my classroom that night watching where your money goes.
Yeah.
I'll have you eating the chow that I'm providing for these guys before class.
Yeah.
And you see the quality of the food that you're paying for. So if anybody wants to donate, THF or honor.org.
Honor.org.
Go check it out, and then talk to Sean.
I mean, we had Sean on and ran it in his episode. We'll run it in the description in this episode as well. So if you're looking for a place to send your money that is going to 100% impact guys that have provided a blanket of freedom for this country, this is the place to do it. Scroll down, find it in the bio, find it in the description, and I've been on this before, and you guys know me. Guys that have watched the show is the reason I say some of those organizations do good things is because some of those organizations have been caught doing not good things and not sending the money where the money was supposed to go.
Right.
This is one that you can hear from me, Sean, Dave, everybody that has been affiliated with this. Can tell you where your money's going and the way in which it's being spent, and it's saving lives, and it's reinforcing an infrastructure of sound-minded individuals that are extremely capable going out into the business world. And
if you can't give money, you can give your time. Coaching, corporate coaching, for the guys, sitting in on interview night, helping work interviews, or just being a cup of coffee for one of the guys. Like I used to tell the guys, I was like, go out and have cups of coffee with any. If you don't want to be a doctor, go have a cup of coffee with a doctor, because it's not being a doctor, it's who the doctor knows.
It's networks everything.
Network with these cats. If you own a company, look at hiring some of them, bring them in, give them interviews, have them just bird dog you for a day.
Yeah.
Because they need to figure it out. Because especially a guy like me that was in 20 years, no idea what the civilian world looked like. When I got out, I was like, what?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about purpose earlier. I say that purpose is something that kills our community as well when guys get out and their whole identity is wrapped up in being a MARSOC operator, wrapped up in these other things, wrapped up in being a grunt, warfighter, gunfighter. And then you get out and there's no gunfighting to do, and there's no MARSOCing to do, and there's no parachute rigging to do.
Yeah.
And you're, moving on in your life, and maybe now you have some kids, and maybe you got a house, and the mundane parts of life are a lot of times what guys like us struggle with. And so when you have this organization of instructors and you're a fellow that can pick the mind of these guys that have already been in your boots, already been in your shoes, already transferred out, likely seen more combat than you did, and they made it work somehow, then they're the right guys to pick the minds of. Mm-hmm. And everything I've seen from your instructors to the cadre that's leading at the top, top-notch professional.
Yeah,
I can't say enough about just the small interactions that I've had where, when you sit down with somebody and you say, that motherfucker knows what he's talking about. That guy's got this going on.
Yeah.
That's everybody that I've met from THF.
Yeah. Lindsay Cashin, who's the vice president of people for THF, she's in the local Wilmington area, and she's the spouse of a Marine, but she's always been in the corporate world and kind of the HR area. And she's a rock star.
Yeah.
She's as much of a lioness than any female Marine or any other female operator that I ever searched. She's a superhero.
Get 'em.
And she does it. I mean, she brings her A.
Well, and it's passion
day.
too. These people didn't have to do this. They're doing this because it was a needed thing. Somebody identified, hey, we need this.
Yeah.
And then they're dumping their passion into it. So I love that.
Look, last thing that I said, what I'll say about this is I did a Signal Fire episode, which if you don't know about a Veterans Business Collective down in Wilmington,
Yep.
they're a great group of guys, and there's a Signal Fire put on a podcast, and I said, as I was working for THF, I said, our ribbons and medals now are relationships. I was like, that's your reward now. It's not the badges and the ribbons and the medals. It's the relationships you build. And if you want to have a relationship with somebody, because that's how we work. We're a tribe, freaking animal. And I said, and I'll say, if you want to have a relationship with a guy that needs help when he's getting out, engage with THF, and you'll build that relationship with somebody, and you'll help them in their next stage. So,
shout out. Well, dude, this has been awesome.
Yeah,
it's been a good time. It's been informative because a lot of times I have people from my community and I know a lot about my community and how things work. You're somebody that's not from necessarily my community. Right. And so that's very eye-opening to me. And for all you guys that are out there that are also not from my community, hey, I'm going to keep having guys on to explain this stuff and to pass the knowledge of, of different MOSs, of integrating with different MOSs, and then definitely the struggle, battle, or suffering that comes with transition. I can't thank you enough, man, for coming on.
Thank you for having me, man.
It's been awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna.
I think I hit everything in my reading.
I think we hit a lot.
If not, we'll pick it up some other time.
Yeah, we can get another one. But
yeah, thank you, and to everybody out there, man. Look, listen. Help is only a phone call away, man. If you're struggling, reach out, dude. Reach out, and
if you're not struggling, reach out.
True that.
Because you don't know who you're helping on the other end.
That's right.
Hey guys, until next time, this is Choices Not Chances. We look forward to seeing you again. And just like any other episode, you've seen something in this that needs to be shared, something that resonated with you, something that you want to get out, please share it, tag the show, tag the profiles of the guests that are on, and get this out to your community, and we can get 1% better every day, just like we've been doing. So Choices Not Chances, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ryan.
Not too far. You're marking ability. Hit him. Yeah, that's good. That's a good shot. That's money. Yeah. Money.